My name is Erica Lorraine Spencer, and I remain subject to state surveillance and terrorism by the state of California that is operating a malicious targeting system, which is referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring via communication devices. And it is in violation of federal stalking statute 18 U.S.C. sections 2261A subsections 1 and 2. My website and podcast serve the public good by publishing evidence of the public entity's ceaseless engagement in a pattern of conduct intended to stalk and monitor via communication devices, surveil, harass, and terrorize an American citizen in concert with the people of the state of California. Documentation serves the lawful purposes of wide exposure, federal prosecution, and influencing federal legislation with policies specifically designed to punish, dismantle, and disincentivize an unprecedented targeting system by a public entity that acts in concert with the people of the state in order to criminally place under surveillance and terrorize an American citizen, which is a matter of public corruption in the state of California. Notice: intellectual property theft is particularly egregious and equally unlawful where the sole inventor and creator of the intellectual property is the targeted individual. Erica Lorraine Spencer, subject to the unconstitutional and inhumane government system of gang stalking, otherwise referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring via communication devices, because of which the intellectual property created by the targeted individual, who is, in fact, Erica Lorraine Spencer, as the intellectual property also proves, serves to establish via evidence and expose the existence of criminal surveillance and thus an inherent threat posed by the U.S. government and the civilian population sharing engagement in the unlawful system. Such evidence that includes all of the content created by Erica Lorraine Spencer, images, videos, audio, etc., belongs solely and entirely to Erica Lorraine Spencer only and is necessarily published online in order to protect her life, safety, and liberty as the targeted individual, who is also the intellectual property owner, no less protected from theft procured through targeting by a public entity. Theft of any intellectual property belonging to Erica Lorraine Spencer, which is necessarily committed while she, being both creator and inventor, remains oppressed by the public entity via criminal surveillance, is a criminal and inhumane means of infringement under all circumstances and not protected nor enforceable pursuant to any invalid or fraudulent acts of copyright, trademarks, patents, etc., including as it pertains to any ideas associated with or generated from the intellectual property or the intellectual property owner, Erica Lorraine Spencer, whether creative, business, or otherwise, nor does the intellectual property owner consent to any such means of infringement and theft.
Hundreds and hundreds of stalkers, each stalking, molesting with impossible light. This is the entity of sex offenders, and so obsessed with me. This is the Nephilim that wants to be right next to me while they molest me. The sex offender that's removing my covering, touching me when I'm unconscious, a sexual assault and battery, while they're also molesting with impossible light, stalking. That's what's stalking at the bus stop. There's no bus coming. This is a demon, and it's also a stalker. And this is the entity that's going to be prosecuted. This is the mentally ill that are monitoring my vagina. This is the mentally ill that are stalking with amplified noise. This is the mentally ill that's, again, obsessively wanting to be around me. That's literally the stalker at a bus stop where there's no bus arriving. These are the demons that are engaging what is following me around everywhere, doing so as an entity. And that mental illness is an unlawful threat to your life, and it's exactly why the entity is going to be prosecuted in the way that it is. It is currently 6:21 a.m. and possible light activity present. The entity engaging in what is the ongoing perpetual sex offense. The entity speaking as the state, present as the state, and this is the state that's acting in furtherance of the conspiracy to commit murder while obsessing in this matter, which is an unlawful threat to your life. Doing so as the entity is engaged in surveillance. This isn't traffic. These demons are, as I've shown on video, are molesting with impossible light, and they plant one right here next to me, engaging in the sex offense in your face as I'm documenting the sexual violence that they're engaging in, touching me when I'm in an unconscious state, like rapists do, like stalkers do, while they're engaging in that pattern of conduct. This is audible activity of a psychopath that's conspiring by murder while gang stalking, and that psychopath that's engaging in what is an unlawful threat to your life in that specific environment. The state has nothing that they're stating other than what is an unlawful threat to your life. So I'm capturing this sex offender. This is the Nephilim. All right, the demons are stopping on the side of the road, monitoring with them together. This is the entity that's going to be prosecuted. Paul Leon is a sex offender, and he's going to be prosecuted. So the entity is engaging in what is an unlawful threat, and this is why you're not supposed to be engaging in criminal conspiracy of murdering somebody that you're gang stalking, which is proven as well. And they're also sex offenders. Touching me in my sleep, hovering over me, stalking me, sitting around, molesting me in my sleep. This is what they're doing with regard to the sex offense. The perpetual sex offense also includes the molestation with impossible light activity, and they do it by the hundreds. This is surveillance on the roads and the highways. And many of those license plates I documented last night, they represent the entity. The entire state is a sex offender, and I'm going to prosecute the state. And it includes Paul Leon. It includes every demon, Alan D. Wapner, Michael, they're going to be prosecuted as the sex offenders that they are. And you plant a sex offender right in front of me, and what you're hearing in the background is a sex offender that is hostile to being identified as exactly what it is. That's how obsessed they are with my vagina. That's how obsessed they are with my breathing pattern. That's how obsessed they are with me when I'm in an unconscious state, and they want to touch all over me and follow me around everywhere. That's why Jason Fields and Tracy Banks are going to federal prison as well. Okay? That's the entity that's following me around in helicopters. It is currently 6:23 a.m. and it's Friday, September 26, 2025. These demons are together acting, engaging in a sex offense. And they're doing so while I am outside on a bench sleeping, and they're obsessing over me. That's the Nephilim. That's the living dead. And they're going to be prosecuted. This is P.O.C. All right, it is currently 9:15 a.m. This is an ongoing update regarding the documentation that I maintain while I remain subject to the ceaseless pattern of conduct. Again, my podcast is not running 24 hours a day, meaning I'm not recording 24 hours a day. I remain subject to the pattern of conduct 24 hours a day. Okay, so you're mindful of that with regard to the wealth of documentation that I do maintain, even though I'm not even maintaining an ongoing ceaseless documentation 24 hours a day. This is relevant to the entity that's engaged in what is federal group stalking and monitoring, which is the maintenance of what is criminal surveillance. And while the government's engaging in criminal surveillance, it is the ongoing maintenance of harassment, terrorism, and psychological torture committed as a public entity. And that public entity is also a demonic entity. And this is relevant to what is domestic terrorism. In the United States, I'm in California, in Southern California, in Ontario, California, to be even more precise. And that is just as of late. I'm documenting the pattern of conduct in Southern California in a plethora of cities and counties, and in the adjacent state, Nevada. Okay, so this is the pattern of conduct by the U.S. government as I go from place to place, which includes state to state. Harassment, terrorism, and psychological torture by an entity is the entity that's engaged in gang stalking, and it is engaged in federal group stalking and monitoring, which is maintained in the specific environment, which is also always present. And this is also the commission of what is the perpetual sex offense. The perpetual sex offense by entity, which is sexual assault and battery, committed as an entity that uses helicopters just like they are now at 9:17 a.m. That is the sex offender, the Ontario Police, the sex offender, Mike Lorenz, the mentally ill terrorist, Mike Lorenz, who is being removed from law enforcement, and that agency being disbanded. They are engaged in facilitation while committing the perpetual sex offense in real time, as the sex offender is still obsessively stalking, still obsessively engaging in sexual violence, which they, as I'm documenting, referring to right now, continue in bathrooms. That's an agency that's engaged in what is federal group stalking and monitoring, criminal surveillance of a sexual nature, of a predatory nature, of a sexually motivated purpose, and not law enforcement. They also do so, like they are now, at 9:17 a.m. with the intent to obstruct justice. That is, inflicting sexually motivated types of harms, sexual trauma, in order to obstruct justice, in order to deter documentation, which, as you have seen, does not work on the federal prosecutor. Nonetheless, Mike Lorenz is being removed from law enforcement, the agency is being disbanded, and the terrorists of the Ontario Police Department are going to federal prison, okay? But that is a tactic of the entity that is engaged in surveillance of me and surveillance of this evidence, which is also a federal offense, interfering with an ongoing public investigation of the United States government that's maintaining criminal surveillance with the people of the state in furtherance of the conspiracy to commit murder, which the entity is openly engaging in while it sounds helicopter activity, knowledgeable, mindful, intentionally doing so while I'm in the midst of documentation. That's the entity that's engaged in what is the sex offense, the sexual assault and battery committed as an entity, a public entity that is also a demon-possessed entity. This is the Nephilim, okay? The predatory and sexually violent pattern of conduct includes an unlawful touching that the entity is always engaging in with directed light, by the way. Doing so while I'm documenting the proof of what is the fake sun. It is a perpetual sex offense. And as you've seen on video, as I've narrated via podcast, the entities engage in the perpetual sex offense with the stalking and molestation and pursuit with engineered light, which is occurring in the absence of the fake sun. That is, the fake sun documentation is proof of who the targeted individual is, who the Nephilim are pursuing, who the Nephilim are obsessed with, who the Nephilim are conspiring to murder. And the Nephilim includes the Ontario Police Department that are being disbanded, that engage in stalking me using its helicopters, which the Nephilim will be far removed from helicopters and commercial planes, okay? The entity is, and that's because the Nephilim have engaged in using commercial planes and helicopters to stalk and monitor and sexually violate me. They do so with the people of the state that you hear gang stalking in the background, okay? The entities engaging in what is the predatory and sexually violent pattern of conduct, which includes an unlawful touching, like I was stating. This is an unlawful touching committed by the entity. An unlawful touching by the entity for the demented and predatory purpose of molesting the person of the targeted individual via directed light in order to harass, terrorize, and psychologically torture, as well as sexually violate as an entity that is obsessed. Okay, the entity is also not only sexually obsessed, the entity is obsessed with harming the targeted individual, and harm is also inherent to the molestation, the sexual violation of the targeted individual's person and their privacy, which is also underway at a venue such as the Ontario Town Square, where open surveillance is underway by the Nephilim, who are gang stalking at the Ontario Town Square, where they're engaging in that as a population, which I've also documented on a ceaseless basis. Doing so as the people of the state, doing so as the establishments such as Wells Fargo, the Mule Cart Smokehouse, the apartment complexes, downtown Ontario luxury apartments. They are sharing in that perpetual sex offense, and that is Sarah's Regis is going to be prosecuted. Practically how that works out, Sarah's Regis group prosecuted as a perpetual sex offender. Gang stalking with the state. Gang stalking is an exceedingly violent sex offense, and the entity is engaging in that in the shoes of the state, not a private company engaging in the state's pattern of conduct. This is the entity that is engaging in that, and they are doing so with the entity that is in real time providing evidence against it while the pattern of conduct remains ceaselessly underway, and I document it. The public entity, which is, as I'm in Ontario, acting via the City of Ontario and the people of the state, they repeat the threatening sexual violence as it is publicly documented, just like I'm documenting now, as it is publicly documented and published. And they are doing this as a mentally ill and obsessed predator intending to harm and traumatize. And this is the conduct of the Nephilim. The Nephilim are subject to an open exposure and also a federal prosecution. All right. The entity includes sex offenders documented, which includes the Ontario International Airport. And that's the documentation that I want to hone in on. I'm going to start with what I'm documenting this morning. And even what I documented this morning doesn't include the totality of the entity stalking me by planes. And by stalking me by planes, remember, as a human being, as one person, I am only documenting what I am capable of perceiving in the moment. And that's relevant to the tangible evidence prosecuting in court. I have already spoken of that which I spiritually discerned, and then I went about proving it with tangible evidence. That is, number one, that these are demons, and number two, that they are specifically targeting me. And then the P.O.C. establishes that. All right, and the entity is engaging in what is conduct that I am documenting in order to prosecute in court and prosecute in the unprecedented manners that the law requires, that justice requires, based on the government's criminal conduct, the government that is exposed as the Nephilim. Okay, this is in the city of Ontario. The Ontario International Airport is engaged in terrorism, and the Nephilim include the Ontario International Airport, operated under the corrupt leadership calling itself the Airport Board. This is the Nephilim, and they are maintaining a means whereby the terrorism that is underway in the city of Ontario is ceaselessly and systematically maintained. And those that are going to be prosecuted as violent sex offenders as an entity include Alan D. Wapner. This is the president of the so-called Airport Board, and this is also identifying a terrorist, and also this is somebody that is a demon-possessed person. Alan D. Wapner is of the Nephilim. Kurt Hagman. This is another demon, referring to himself in the physical as a vice president. This is a demon-possessed person. He's engaged in terrorism, and he is engaged in gang stalking me as I'm exposing the Ontario International Airport, which is the Nephilim, engaged in surveillance using commercial planes. Ronald Leverage, calling himself a treasurer, which is, again, the Nephilim, acting through this state actor, a terrorist, being prosecuted pursuant to public corruption, and doing so by abusing a position on the board of the airport where the airport's engaging in terrorism. This is the Nephilim that is targeting me through the Ontario International Airport. This is Jim Bowman, referring to himself as a secretary on a corrupt airport board. This is the Nephilim doing nothing other than using Jim Bowman, who is a demon-possessed person, gang stalking me, and abusing the position that he has on a corrupt airport board, and is going to be prosecuted as a perpetual sex offender, doing so as an entity. And Julia Gu, this is a homosexual female, engaging in the sex offense, obsessed with a woman, obsessed with a woman's genitalia, this is the Nephilim using a female that is a corrupt terrorist in the city of Ontario on the airport board, engaging in what is terrorism using commercial planes, which the people of the state that are gang stalking me, for example, the demons, the Nephilim, that are stalking in the path at the Ontario Town Square, they're doing so in concert with this corrupt airport board, which is going to be removed from existence, and the airport is being removed altogether, as the Nephilim have engaged in what is using a corrupt business such as the airport, a corrupt government actor such as the Ontario International Airport, as a guise for terrorism, where the Nephilim is maintaining massive surveillance, which is monitoring by demonic spirits that are employed on the airport board, engaged in what is I have referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring. All right, the Ontario executive team, these are going to be physically prosecuted as sex offenders acting in the shoes of the government, using commercial planes and engaging what is public corruption, the corrupt business practices of domestic terrorists. And these are exposed. This is the Nephilim. And they are using what is this Ontario International Airport as a means of targeting me. And I'm going to specifically document these terrorists that are demon-possessed. And this is, again, who Satan is using. And with regard to scripture, this is the Nephilim. All right. And this is Atif El-Kadi, calling and referring to himself as, and abusing in a position as, chief executive officer on the Ontario executive team that are engaged in and facilitating the corrupt business practices of the airport that's engaging in domestic terrorism, psychological torture, stalking, using commercial planes, and enabling these airlines to engage in stalking me through that airport. And it's the same with Karen Kavanaugh, referring to herself as an executive vice president, corporate strategy and performance of what is terrorism, not a legitimate business of the airport or legitimate business practices of the airlines. Angela Lauber Conroy, Senior Vice President and Chief Police Officer. Again, these are homosexual females, demon-possessed. This is the Nephilim that's engaged in what is the use of, as you are prosecuting the Nephilim that are engaged in public corruption, as you're prosecuting the government, which is actually exposed as the Nephilim, that are engaged in monitoring, which is prosecuted as surveillance, and it's demonic, and it's also occurring in the demonic environment. So this is, again, I'm going through and naming those that are going to be prosecuted, that are going to be removed from the positions that they hold, and that are also going to be held accountable for the ongoing terrorism that I'm exposing, which they inflict against American citizens that don't have the ability, don't have the evidence to prove it. And this is surveillance underway by the airport in the city of Ontario and the state of California, which poses a national security threat, which is also the basis for shutting down this airport. Celeste Heinonen, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. She's a homosexual female. She's a demon. This is the Nephilim, and she's engaged in targeting me and abusing her position with the Ontario International Airport in doing so. Charles Miwa, or Charles Miwa. This is a senior vice president and chief information officer. And if this is an immigrant, he is subject to deportation. All right. This is for terrorism underway and doing so through the corrupt business practices where the Ontario International Airport is engaged in terrorism and facilitation of terrorism, and doing so with the corrupt business practices of the Ontario International Airport. Elisa Gray, Senior Vice President of Revenue Management. Again, another demon that is a part of the Nephilim that are engaged in targeting me, knowing exactly who I am. And that's how you have the demon possessed using commercial planes targeting me throughout the city of Ontario. With regard to the demons that are engaged in criminal monitoring, and is going to be prosecuted as maintaining criminal surveillance in furtherance of harassment, terrorism, and psychological torture. Aaron Cello. This is Jamal Aviles and James Kessler. These are those that are also on the Ontario executive team. They are the corrupt airport leadership engaging in what is stalking, monitoring, terrorizing me in the city of Ontario through the corrupt business practices. These are the corrupt leadership. This is the Nephilim, okay, to be specific. But these are the corrupt leaders on the board, on the executive team of the Ontario International Airport, and they're going to be removed from these positions, and this is the entity that's going to be prosecuted as the violent sex offenders, enabling the corrupt airlines to engage in what is targeting me, and doing so as a means of what is the gang stalking underway under the corrupt leadership of Paul Leon in the city of Ontario. All right, and the airlines, again, the sex offenders that are engaging in what is maintaining harassment, ongoing domestic terrorism, and psychological torture in furtherance of murder, committing the perpetual sex offense in doing so, maintaining criminal surveillance in private spaces, and the facilitation of such sexual violence by the city of Ontario and the people of the state, that is the state of California. Alaska Airlines, American Airlines, Avianca Airlines, China Airlines, Delta Airlines, Frontier Airlines, JetBlue, Southwest Airlines, Starlux Airlines, United Airlines, Volaris, Amazon Prime Air, FedEx, and UPS, which is the United Parcel Service, utilizing commercial planes associated, engaging in what is terrorism and targeting with the Ontario International Airport. All right, it is currently 9:30 a.m., and I am documenting this morning the entity targeting with commercial planes and using the city of Ontario utilizing smaller planes. It is aerial surveillance altogether, and I'm going to document that. Following from where I'm located, where the people of the state are stalking me all night long, I'm engaging what is a sexual assault and battery, touching me in an unconscious state for the purpose of the molestation of with engineer light, which is an unlawful touching as an entity that's engaging in criminal monitoring. And this is the Nephilim that you hear engaging in what is the ongoing sex offense in real time, gang stalking, terrorism, and furtherance of murder in real time. And this is also why the Nephilim are going to be judged by God himself, and they're also being prosecuted as an entity. This is the city of Ontario, the state of California's criminal conduct, while they're engaging in the elements of monitoring in real time. That is shared by Brightview. That's engaging in the elements of monitoring with the entity, and doing so, again, it's relevant to all the ways in which the entity is going to be prosecuted under federal law, which is including federal prison, disbanding, removal of that department altogether, such as the Ontario Fire Department, such as the entity that's going to be removed from office, such as the gang stalkers of the Ontario City Council, and I've already stated the disbanding of the corrupt police department, and the entity that is going to be prosecuted as a population of domestic terrorists that fill the state of California. And it needs to be known that this is the Nephilim. The Nephilim is here, and this is exposing how the Nephilim, the demon-possessed, are engaged in targeting American citizens. And it is a matter of public corruption. All right, following from 537 North Euclid Avenue, this is the maintenance by Brightview. That's a company engaging in what is targeting. Everything that you can hear, everything that is occurring in relevant position is a means of monitoring. It is 9:32 a.m. It is, documenting surveillance following from 537 North Euclid Avenue to where I'm at, 224 North Euclid Avenue. 6:31 a.m., you'll see the images of the entity engaging in aerial surveillance, and it's the same pattern of conduct by the commercial airlines that are engaging in stalking me, and while I'm subject to a ceaseless sex offense monitoring, and the sex offense is also underway while they're stalking you. The entity is stalking in bathrooms. So it's also a sex offense while they're molesting the person. It's also a sex offense while they're violating in an inhumane level as a government, as a population. This is the Nephilim that is a sex offender engaging in what is a ceaseless surveillance of an American, ceaseless monitoring of an American citizen. All right. Documenting at, again, 6:53 a.m. This is as I am walking to I'm at the OVITT Family Community Library. The City of Ontario is surrounding with light activity. The dumpster truck, the gray van, that's the City of Ontario. The people of the state gang stalking in their own vehicles, that's the blue SUV. I'm capturing this at 6:54 a.m. These are psychopaths. This is the Nephilim stalking with light activity, stalking in the path, and doing so while the entity is surrounding with aerial surveillance. And this is at the OVITT Family Community Library as the entity is following from place to place. All right, again, that is 6:55 a.m. As I am, you'll see Securitas, gang stalking. The African-American female with the mop on her head is creating a means of light activity while she is stalking in the path. Southwest Airlines is stalking at 7:06 a.m. while I'm at the Ontario Town Square. The Ontario International Airport is gang stalking at 8:12 a.m. while the entity is crossing path engaging in surveillance via a commercial airline plane. Flying over me where I'm located, just like they do where I'm at 537 North Euclid Avenue, where I'm at 507 North Euclid Avenue, while I'm at 415, the hometown barbershop, where the entity engaged in gang stalking me on the bench outside of that venue. 415 North Euclid Avenue is the address. They were flying right over me as you're looking at the entity stalking me by commercial planes, by aerial surveillance, wherever I'm located on Euclid Avenue. Doing so in concert with the people of the state that are obsessively stalking, just like Brightview is right now. 8:49 a.m. This is the entity stalking. That is also Southwest Airlines flying over me at the Ontario Town Square, while the people of the state, this is the Nephilim, are obsessing over me, stalking all around me. And this is the reality of what the Nephilim are doing, what the demon-possessed are doing. And it's not about the public corruption, which is the guise where the entity is engaging in surveillance. The entity is demon-possessed and is engaged in monitoring. Okay? And that's, in other words, going by the name of Wells Fargo, going by the name of the City of Ontario, the municipality, engaging in landscaping, the mule cart smokehouse, the entity that's engaging what is maintaining the business of what is the business of the apartment complexes, for example, the downtown Ontario luxury apartments, the entity that's gang stalking through the businesses such as, trying to think, CMAX, the street sweeper, the entity that is engaged in monitoring through the corrupt business practices. Yes, even the airlines like Southwest Airlines, but I'm thinking outside of that because I'm going through specifically the means of aerial surveillance right now. So you can use the entity that's engaged in criminal monitoring because UPS does use its commercial planes. It's also using its vehicles engaging in surveillance. That's the corrupt business practices of the entity that's actually engaged in what is monitoring and surveillance and not focused on delivering mail and packages. This is what Amazon Prime is doing under the fake sun. As I'm going from the library to the Chevron yesterday morning, the focus is not delivering a package to the San Bernardino County Housing Authority on Lemon Avenue while the fake sun is moving in alignment to me, while I am again on the same street, aligned with the same street, Euclid Avenue, and that fake sun is keeping in alignment with me as I'm walking north of the same street. That's speaking to the focus actually which is me, and that's the focus of the Nephilim. That's the focus which is criminal monitoring. And when you're prosecuting the demon-possessed that are in the government, that are the population that are engaged in criminal surveillance, it's understanding public corruption, which is given the federal government probable cause to investigate and prosecute under laws as they exist and laws that shall come into existence, where the Nephilim are here and they're engaged in what is targeting while they're monitoring American citizens. And the demon-possessed, which are the Nephilim, are targeting in furtherance of murder, sacrificing. Okay? And this is something that you need to be aware of. It's currently 9:37 a.m. All right, and that's just an example. This is relevant to documentation regarding the entity that's engaging what is the perpetual sex offense. the exceedingly violent sex offense inherent to federal group stalking and monitoring, which is ordinarily referred to in the vernacular as gang stalking. The demon-possessed are gang stalking, and the demon-possessed, this is exposing the Nephilim, the presence of the Nephilim, the conduct, the behavior of the Nephilim, the system that is executed by the Nephilim. This is P.O.C. All right, license plate. Engaging in surveillance with the state. Has nothing else to do. Federal prosecution is absolutely necessary. License 9HEX003. Surveillance at Wells Fargo. That's a female. That's what you need to know, the Nephilim. And that's actually the homosexual that is demon-possessed, that's obsessing over me and stalking me. License plate KNYKID2. Present on another day, engaging in surveillance, doing so at Wells Fargo. And so is Wells Fargo engaged in surveillance. 7Z13092. License 6XCP114. License 8VXF855. All right, that's a demon-possessed gang stalker engaging in surveillance by place of employment. 6LLE955. P.O.C. And it's 9:40 a.m. License plate 9CFW254. Graffiti protective coatings 09979E4. 8X13521. 8MXJ814. 44929W1. 8DSW145. 9FGA239. 9EFH194. 8Y45961. 7BWB738. 9TIH520. 'P.O.C.
All right, that's very low elevation. This is Stalking. And it is currently, by the way, 6:07 p.m. The airport is stalking with the people of the state. So this demon-possessed mother and father are actually stalking another woman together. She's a homosexual. He's obsessed with my vagina, monitoring me inside of the library all day long. The demon at the turn circle is stalking me. The demon sitting at the bench is stalking me. The apartment complex, all of this traffic is for purposes of stalking me. And this is the Nephilim. And it includes the demons of the Ontario International Airport, which is being shut down. And that was planned activity that you would not hear, nor would you see, if Alan D. WAPNER and the airport board and the executive board were not engaged in surveillance. And that's the Nephilim stalking in planes. This is P.O.C. at the Ontario Town Square at 6:08 p.m. That's Ontario Police, immediately following the gang stalkers of the Ontario International Airport. And those are the demons that are going to federal prison for kidnapping and for engaging in what is stalking an American citizen using a helicopter. That's immediately following gang stalking by commercial plane as I'm uploading it. Okay, so that's the federal stalking underway with the intent to obstruct justice, a very heavily documented pattern, and the people of the state sharing that. So to Securitas, this tall African-American male, he walks like a pole, is up his backside. He's engaged in gang stalking. He's doing so like the Asian male is in the morning under the fake sun that's here, the fake sun that is still remaining at the Ontario Town Square, where the entity is gang stalking by the Ontario International Airport and the Ontario Police Department.
Securitas is gang stalking. And Securitas is gang stalking with its third-party employee that's also subject to federal prison while they're engaging in terrorism and harassment and psychological torture on a federal prosecutor who is unfazed by it. And I merely accumulate evidence to put demons like C. Hazelwood and Ravanko in prison, because that's where they're going. It's currently 6:15 p.m. The entity sounding helicopter activity as I begin uploading. And the homosexual and her demon-possessed partner are indeed obsessed with my vagina together. The entity stalked with helicopter because they're hostile, as they are accurately described regarding their shared mental illness. This is the Nephilim that's engaged in what is gang stalking me and their condition and their criminal system. You need to know that the Nephilim are mentally ill and they're violent sex offenders, and they're engaged in what are keeping the genitalia of your children under surveillance in places like bathrooms and in your home. And in the same way that the Ontario police, the demon-possessed, the Nephilim, the Nephilim are being shut down. The Nephilim are no longer going to be engaged in law enforcement in Ontario, California. And they're engaged in what is criminal surveillance, and doing so, stalking me in a helicopter moments after I capture gang stalking by the same city of Ontario using commercial planes where there are no arrivals nor departures from the Ontario International Airport. And all the names that I documented this morning, those are indeed terrorists, and that is the Nephilim engaging in what is the abusive positions of an airport that's used for terrorism, where the Nephilim, the demon-possessed, are maintaining criminal surveillance. They're monitoring spirits. These are demons. And those demons engaged in what is using a helicopter to keep me under surveillance right now to communicate a threat that the whole world is witnessing that entity unintelligently pose in front of the whole world and the federal government. The federal government is being prosecuted for gang stalking me, and gang stalking me because of the criminal activity that the federal government has already committed, stealing from me, engaging in sex crimes against me, permitting the Ontario Police Department to act with the impunity that I documented. Guess who's being prosecuted for that? The federal government. And that's why they're still targeting. And that is the Nephilim, the demon-possessed. The Nephilim is spoken of in Scripture. They are here, and this is what the system is that they're engaging in. This is the work of Satan, and this is Nephilim. These are indeed the demon-possessed, and their mental illness is extreme. It is currently 6:17 p.m. Unfortunately, I know many of this mentally ill entity, the Nephilim, make up what are the fake friends and family that I have, and they're going to prison. They're going to federal prison while they've been engaged in what is gang stalking me and thinking that I was going to just unravel and lose my mind so that they can get away with stealing my money and property. And they also think that there's going to be some sort of conversation out of court and that there's going to be some negotiation regarding what was stolen from me, and it's not. And if the entity engages in attempting to do that, you're going to prison for it. It's currently 6:17 p.m. because while I'm sleeping outside and the entity, the Nephilim, is terrorizing me and sexually violating me at night while I'm unconscious, removing my blanket off of me so that they can look at my body while they molest me with engineered light, and you have the audacity to come into my presence and think that I'm going to take some deal outside of court. Not only are you delusional, you're going to federal prison. And the federal government, the entity that's sitting around targeting, not investigating, you're going to federal prison. This is P.O.C. It's currently 6:18 p.m. I'm sleeping outside while the entity is sitting on my money. That's what's happening. You're going to federal prison for this. This is P.O.C. License 7M0Y658. I can't really see that one, but I can see this one. Monitoring by crossing path by driving out of the parking lot of Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo's gang stalking. And they're gang stalked with Ontario police that fly over me, stalking me by helicopter, coming around with the helicopter while I'm uploading the evidence, threatening conduct while you're gang stalking with the Ontario International Airport, and I'm documenting, uploading it. So you come around with it. That's the entity engaging in that ongoing documented pattern, obstruction of justice. 6U-EX 586. It's 6:30 p.m. Jason Isaac Fields, Tracy Lemire Banks Jenkins Petty, whatever alias she's going by, however many husbands she has, however many demons of various police departments she has had sex with in order to recruit and targeting me, in order to put demonic spirits on them. Understand that Tracy and Jason are going to a federal prison. They're at the top of the list. They're going to federal prison, and there is no negotiating with the entity. First of all, there's no negotiation with the Nephilim. These are demons. And second of all, they're still gang stalking me with these demons out here. There's not even a basis to negotiate, nor do either of them. The government has no authority to negotiate with me on the street. You're not going to gang stalk me and try to murder me in secret, and then when that fails, try to do some back alley deal in order to avoid what is what is justice? My documentation being published on the internet, you need to understand that this is an inevitable justice that's going to be given to me. And the fact that any sort of discussion about trying to avoid that, you're going to be prosecuted for that. It's relevant to damages. It's relevant to the malice. It's relevant to the criminal conduct that I'm subjected to because of you. And it's relevant to how much time, those of you who are going to prison, it's relevant to how much time you're getting. It's a part of the crime. I just want to be clear on that. To date, I am still in this position because of the government that's targeting, because of the Nephilim, because of the demons that tried to kill me off regarding this message that was always going to be given, period. And not only that, I still remain subject to it while the entity is sitting around twiddling its fingers about what it's going to do while I'm still subject to this pattern of conduct. There's no negotiating when you're still engaged in targeting. But even if you weren't, understand, I will not be negotiating with any demon. I won't be negotiating with any level of government. And you have gotten to this point, you did that yourself, showing that you're committed to trying to murder me, showing that you're committed to trying to oppress me, showing that you're committed to ongoing torture, engaging in what is ongoing, unlawful, inhumane, and satanic experimentation. I'm not negotiating with any of you, with any level of government, and there's no amount of money that's going to change it. I'm going to get justice, and I'm going to recover. This is P.O.C. at 6:32 p.m. Jason Fields and Tracy Banks are going to federal prison. P.O.C. Alrighty, sex offenders. License plate, I already got them, 14806M3, and so is Sarah's Regis. License plate 6LOE030, 8YXF750, 7PSW283, 9UPG835, and license 8YXF454. These are sex offenders. This is the entity engaged in the perpetual sex offense, sexual assault and battery as an entity. License 6RUK752. This is Nephilim. This is a sex offense committed by an entity that's conspiring my murder, gang stalking me, and doing so in concert with venues that include Sarah's Regis, Wells Fargo, what is the Ontario Town Square. It includes what is ARCO. It includes ARCO, Gloria's Cochinas. The entities engaged in what is gang stalking the entire city of Ontario, including the Ontario City Council, the City of Ontario, every level of government, the fire department, the police department, the airport, okay, who are gang stalking. EF45N46, I believe that's a paper plate, and CRR1799, which is Washington. This is the entity that's engaged in what is stalking at the traffic lights in order to molest you with engineered light. Those are sex offenders. These are the that's a Washington plate again. These are sex offenders that are engaging in what is touching, the unlawful touching as well, while I am being molested. The demon possessed are touching me in an unconscious state, removing my covering off of me so that they can, that's an unlawful touching, and that's a sexual assault and battery. And the entity is doing this while they are, again, stalking me as a population. And the engineered light that they're molesting with is also an unlawful touching committed by the government. And the entity is being documented by license plate, by establishment, by city. And the government itself is going to be prosecuted as a sex offender. This is an entity that's engaging what is a perpetual sex offense, as millions of people are sharing in targeting and furtherance of murder. And psychological torture that is sexually violent is that which is intending to result in what is the loss of life of that target individual that is being sexually traumatized and perpetually violated. The target individual's person. This is P.O.C. It's currently 8:06 p.m. Sarah's Regis group is engaging in what is a threat while a sex offender is raising their voice at me as I document them. That raising of the voice is audible activity. It's accomplishing criminal monitoring. And Sarah's Regis group is with the state of California engaging in what is an unlawful threat, while that establishment and the demon possessed that are at that venue gang stalking with Sarah's Regis group is engaging in a sex offense as they're documented, and then engaging in what is threatening with anything that they're stating in addition to what is raising your voice as a sex offender, okay? So a rapist that is then hostile at you because you are documenting the fact or reporting the fact that they raped you, that's the psychopath. That is the Nephilim. Okay, these are demons. It is, again, the extreme mental illness of the entity that is stalking me, the entity that is obsessed with me, the entity that is engaged in what is delusional with regard to the idea that they're going to engage in anything that they're doing in front of the whole world in secret, or that it's going to accomplish the ultimate objective. None of that's going to happen, and the entity is going to pay very severe penalties spiritually and physically, by the way. 8TTL930 gang stalking at gas pump number 3 at ARCO, 434 North Euclid Avenue.
And it's doing so as I'm walking up the street. This is where the entity is stalking by planes. This is where the entity is stalked by the police department. This is where psychopaths are aiming light. All right, that's the outward demonstration of mental illness. License 8E-IP 592 is ARCO. That's also in gang stalking with everybody coming and engaging in what is a federal RICO case. All right, because that's what ARCO is accumulated. That's what ARCO is engaged in. That's what ARCO is going to be prosecuted for. ARCO's headquartered in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a gang stalker. All right, it is currently 8:08 p.m. License plate 9FCZ167. This is the same entity that's been monitoring my vagina all day long. Homosexuals, just like this one with this license plate, a homosexual. This is the psychopath. This is the Nephilim. This is the demon that's operating in a female, and she is very much gay. She's obsessed with my vagina. She is stalking me at night, and she's doing so with the intent to touch me. That's also a sex offender that's homosexual, and is doing so pursuant to what is a government system. This is the Nephilim acting together. 8EIP 765. License 8BP, I can't really see that one. License 9BTY351, engaging in the sex offense with Chevron. That's again 9BIY351. That's on cameras as well. They're gang stalking as customers at these venues that are also going to be prosecuted. All right, license plate 8VXC 774. All right, this is criminal activity that ARCO's engaged in. They're not engaged in any constitutionally protected business. They're engaged in criminal monitoring. They're engaging in a massive sex offense. They're engaged in facilitation of all the above as well. And they're doing so while they're making money off of it. And that's what's going to be stripped in the prosecution of these businesses that are conspiring the death of an American citizen that they are keeping under surveillance and doing so under the guise of maintaining a business and relevant position in this specific environment. It's 8:09 p.m. That's why, by the way, the City of Ontario's gang stalking me at these venues. 8HVX360. Sex offenders, license plate. 9FRJ332. All right, P.O.C. All right, it is currently, 8:10 p.m. Gang stalking at gas pump number 5. Yeah. License 7K67209 and at gas pump number 9BQJ283. They're gang stalking on cameras. They're gang stalking in the specific environment. They're pumping up their gas. They're going into the deli. They're parking, engaging in moving around, stalking in the path in the specific environment with multiple shadows. This is surveillance. This is P.O.C. And again, the entity is gang stalking by working at the venue as well. And this is the entity that's doing so with impunity. This is relevant to the entity that's going to be prosecuted as well. And this is, again, I want to be clear, the entities engaging in conduct while they are simultaneously engaging what is criminal activity on behalf of the government that has failed in any sort of secret act of conspiring murder while gang stalking me in the first place. And the fact that I am documenting it while the entity is still engaging in that criminal system is relevant to the ways in which that entity is going to be prosecuted. And I want to be clear, this is indeed the Nephilim. 9MNB055. 7XIY347 is the gang stalking employee who was engaged in what is criminal monitoring. I'm doing so with the City of Ontario and the people of the state representing the government that's engaging in the P.O.C. So I'm capturing my shadows that surround me. This is relevant to what is, again, the specific environment and the entity that is stalking me, and doing so through the criminal provisions of Chevron, 506 North Euclid Avenue, and the criminal provisions of ARCO, 434 North Euclid Avenue, and the criminal provisions of Starbucks, 507 North Euclid Avenue. They're stalking in the path across the street, monitoring everybody inside of that cafe, everybody in the drive-thru, everybody that is gang stalking by being on the property. It's criminal presence around me. It's surveillance, and it's massive surveillance, and that's just an example because it's the entire City of Ontario. Okay, it is currently, again, 8:12 p.m. This is the entity that is, again, a violent sex offender. P.O.C. It's 8:19 p.m. That is targeting by the airport over the parking lot of the 320 North Euclid Avenue, where I am preparing to read all the license plates of the third parties gang stalking with the City of Ontario. This is P.O.C. License plate 9FKV760. And this is the criminal monitoring that the City of Ontario, the Ontario International Airport, is being removed for. 7SLR538, 7MFU484, 4UQB429, BUTWHYY, 4LEK191. Sitting in the car, gang stalking me while the airport provides amplified audible activity, hovers in the sky space, far from any airport that would have any arrivals or departures from 2500 Airport Drive and 2900 Airport Drive. The entity is doing so in this specific environment so that sex offenders like that, who like to touch me when I'm asleep and molest me with impossible light activity and stalk me all day under a fake sun and keep my vagina under surveillance in the bathroom, can engage in that. And the Ontario International Airport is doing so in furtherance of murder, as are each of the third parties whose license plate I'm going to recite right now. 9APY925, 8CZR647, 7PIC037, 9GLE293, NORMBLE, 6Z88346, 9FOL886, 8FHT366, 9PWL974, 9TBU752, 5UYY370, 9GZG256, and gang stalking at what is the so-called light. A bunch of demons that are gang stalking, playing cards at a table. They're engaged in the pattern of conduct. 8PTU048, 8COY311. And they are stalking in the path while the entity maintains commercial planes over the parking lot, targeting and doing so while I am uploading evidence on the venue of the internet, where the airport and this entity is engaging in surveillance online as well, with no warrant or probable cause or legitimate interest by the U.S. government, and doing so in furtherance of murder, as the entity has committed egregious acts, criminal acts against me, and then sought to gang stalk me in order to keep me from ever exposing it. And the entity is going to be prosecuted for that as well. 8JMT283. 9FSK943, 8A0S888. What you're going to pay attention to with regard to the evidence that I provide. I'm taking picture after picture after picture, and I took a video also of the entity stalking by commercial planes over the Ontario Town Square. The entity is not maintaining any flights over the Ontario Town Square. No airport arrivals or departures are occurring over the Ontario Town Square. That's why there are no planes hovering over that address anymore. And it's hovering over the airport where I am located, and doing so south of my person. This is the entity that's stalking as I go north up the street. That's where the entity that is stalking me by commercial planes in Ontario is maintaining plane activity. And that's what you're going to pay attention to. I am at the Ontario Town Square, not taking any images or video of commercial planes flying north of my person, flying at a distance over 415 North Euclid Avenue or at a distance over the Starbucks while I'm at the Ontario Town Square. I'm capturing images and videos of the entity flying over the Ontario Town Square south of my person, where I'm located, in other words, is where the plane activity is happening. And as I go north, so do the planes. And as I go south on Euclid Avenue, so do the planes. As I go west and go to Stater Brothers, guess what? The entity is no longer taking off over the Ontario Town Square. It's taking off much more west to then be hovering over the Ontario Village Shopping Plaza. Okay, this is the entity that is stalking a sex offender molesting with impossible light. License 9UDW176. That's not headlights, and that's the airport that is engaging in that. This is 3 males in this vehicle. License 9UDW176 is a demon-possessed psychopath. That engineered light is relevant to the identification of the Nephilim. These are demons, and this is also going to be prosecuted as what is a sex offender. That's mental illness identified as well. This is an entity, a car full of males that are engaging in sexual violence together. Again, that's license plate 9UDW176. They molest my body with that. They molest my breasts with that. And this is a psychopath that is pacing. And this is why the airport is being shut down. The City of Ontario is engaging in what is surveillance with these sex offenders together. 9FSK943, 6JYW172, 8RFZ119. All right. This is, again, gang stalking at what is light. This is sexual violence underway by light. Not only are you prosecuting the
rejects, the social rejects that are demon possessed and gang stalking me by going to light, playing cards in the middle of the night, and gang stalking a woman simultaneously, clearly lacking in having any substantial or genuine interests or ambitions in life, probably living in their mother's basement and masturbating to child porn. The entity is engaging what is molesting me with engineered light in the middle of the parking lot where the entity is stalking by commercial planes. Okay, and the entity is doing so again. Let me go ahead and document who these demons are that are gang stalking with the city of Ontario that, like I stated, provides evidence against them when they're engaging in this conduct. It is, hold on, Light on Lemon Avenue. So I'll recite that address momentarily. Let me get these license plates because let me see. Yeah, I'll recite that address momentarily. License 7VJP456, 6JYW172. I also want to note, the entity is very psychopathic. They engage in the pattern of conduct. They molest. These are demons. And they get out the car like nothing happened. Okay? That's the entity that's, again, very a seared conscience. Very also delusional. Okay? This is a very clear-cut prosecution, but it's also speaking to what is very psychopathic, lacking any conscience whatsoever. You're dealing with what are wicked, evil is what I'm exposing at the same time. They engage in violating people, setting people up, killing people with that same disregard, that same conduct as though it's not happening. Okay, that which the demon possessed seek to get away with. The molestation with engineered light is very demonic. It's entirely impossible to ever happen naturally. These are demon possessed people, and I am identifying them by how Scripture has stated what they are and what their origin is. If you're familiar with Scripture and what the Nephilim are, because that's what this entity is. That's who they are. These are the demon possessed. These are those that were spoken of in Scripture, prophesied a long time ago, and spoken of that in the latter days, in these days, in a time distant, far off, that they would be here, and the Nephilim are here, and they are stalking with engineered light. They're stalking, monitoring American citizens under a fake sun. They are engaged in what is stalking with a whole demonic environment, amplified noise included, and in the United States, where it's happening amongst what is public corruption, happening in plain sight, happening with regard to what is the maintenance of an illusion regarding what supposedly appears everyday life. It is the entity that's doing so in the way in which I've shown you, what's supposed to be unmistaken and creating what is a persuasive illusion of just normal everyday society. And when you so are aware of the pattern of conduct, you are seeing there is nothing close to anything normal, natural, or everyday society. That illusion is very clearly recognized, okay? And so is mental illness, so is sexual violence, so is criminal conduct, and so is a threat that you're not supposed to be able to identify and recognize with regard to your children, with regard to you and your safety, with regard to those that are surrounding you. 6JYW172, 6JGS257, 9BSJ730, 8YBS799, 8MYT322, 8XPW584, 8ZHV560, 6PNJ383, 9KUG734, 6NYF032, 7XDM745, 7TKF641, License 8WAM326, 7NVR457, 30074P3, 8KAL283, 6LQS243. And also be aware, the entity that's molesting me by this third party and all these three males that get out of the vehicle, that's a sex offense committed by the entity. Sarah's Regis Group is engaging in a sex offense. The San Bernardino County Housing Authority is engaging in a sex offense. The City of Ontario is committing a sex offense as an entity. The entity that's being disbanded, the Ontario Police Department, are engaging in an entity while they are stalking together. They're doing so through the millions of people that make up the population, and that population is simultaneously acting as one. The entity that's engaging with stalking you with engineered light, this is tantamount to what is a ginormous demonic orgy. It's a sex act that you did not consent to, that you did not
permit the demons to include you in while they are always touching you and touching you together. Okay, in that same, understanding of the unlawful touching, the violation of the target individual's person, that's exactly how it's going to be prosecuted, just like any other sex offense, any other unwarranted, unwelcome, unconsented to touching. The demon-possessed are doing it as a group. They are group stalking you. They are molesting you as a group. They are invading your privacy as a group. They are engaging in what is monitoring your vagina as a group. The gang stalking boys are surrounding the girls' restroom, and the homosexual girls are entering in as the entity. Okay? That's the P.O.C. 6CZV922. And that group is stalking in planes. And that group is losing an entire airport in the city of Ontario. 8MJK002, 9SPH878, and 7FHW026. I'll go ahead and take an image of that, showing you where Saris Regis Group is going to be prosecuted for gang stalking, as the entity is, as you can hear that plane activity, the takeoffs that are a part of the prosecution of removing the Ontario International Airport, and the thorough documentation, the thorough evidence, the thorough investigation regarding pilots taking off from the airport that will never include any sort of disturbance regarding planes hovering over this parking lot, hovering at that elevation, being heard on my podcast, including even flying over the sky space. I'll even give you that level of detail is what is going to prove the entity targeting, and the pilots that are trained to take off from the airport, pilots that are trained to engage in what are takeoffs, period, and landings. It's not going to include what the entity is doing here, and it is also relevant because what the entity is doing around me is not published on the website. Okay, that's because where Delta Airlines flights, for example, are scheduled to arrive or take off from the airport, it's not including hovering over me, over the Ontario Town Square, for example, at the same time. And that's also why it's not published. And that which the entity would like to claim, oh, the flight that's over Erica Spencer's head at 2:52 p.m. is the flight that took off from the airport at 2:50 p.m. No, it's not. No, it's not. And the entity is engaging what is clear targeting, and that's going to be a part of the investigation because you're understanding what is inherent to, and this perhaps is relevant because you need to understand what the entity is doing. With regard to this corruption, no one is asking any questions. For example, when I'm at Alvarado Gardens, the entity would be using commercial planes just flying over the hillside. Planes just flying over the hillside, but where LAX is, and flights that are engaging what are landings and arrivals to that airport, I guarantee you it has nothing to do with what are the scheduled flights. The entity was engaging in surveillance, and the context is that the entity had the fake sun rising in alignment to my living room window and my bedroom window in the evening. The sun never went anywhere. That's also how you know that the Ontario International Airport is gang stalking. But aside from the specific environment evidence, you're getting to the investigation regarding pilots that are targeting, and this is relevant because you need to know that pilots are engaging in what are terrorism. They're murdering people by the masses. And because this is the Nephilim, you need to understand that these are sacrifices unto Satan. These are demonic spirits that have no business having access to pilot licensure, the ability to gain that license, and those laws are going to change now in light of terrorism, surveillance utilizing the airports in the United States. Okay, and the entities engaged in what is a pilot taking off from the Ontario International Airport shall not include hovering over the Ontario Downtown Luxury Apartments, over the Ontario Town Square, over the 706 West Holt Boulevard Starbucks, or the 507 North Euclid Avenue Starbucks, over the ARCO at 434 North Euclid Avenue, over Woodside Senior Apartments at 408 West G Street, over 325 West G Street when I'm at the Deport Professional Building, over the 706 West Holt, over the 636 North Vine Avenue 711. The entity is engaging in what is stalking me throughout the city using planes. And that's not the first time that I'm documenting that. In the middle of LA, because you have an airport in the city does not mean that you go without questioning what the entity is doing in the sky space because of your awareness of surveillance of a demonic nature at that, and what is public corruption. And the entity is going to be subject to a thorough investigation exposing targeting in the ways in which I've shown. And the investigation regarding the prosecution and the removal of the Ontario International Airport as a threat to security, because that is a very extreme and disturbing, demented method of targeting someone that you fully intend to murder and psychologically torture while you are targeting using commercial planes. And those airlines, those businesses making all that money are engaging in that level of targeting an American citizen. That's speaking to, I'm not the first person, and they are contributing their business to terrorism in this country, and that would be internationally as well. So this is literally a public service to the world, not just to the United States, not just to the state of California. But I want to be clear, the investigation is going to clearly show a takeoff from the airport. It arrives in the sky space over that airport. I've been on too many planes. I don't have to have a pilot's license in order to show that, but there will be part of that because everything that I state is supported with facts. And it's not going to include what is hovering over this, like I've shown, like they're doing now, everywhere that they're going. And I've also shown you who they do it in concert with, the demons that are going to federal prison. And it includes the demons that are gang stalking, flying those planes. They're going to federal prison. And they're going to federal prison for the impunity with which they engaged in targeting me and furtherance of psychologically torturing me and keeping my genitalia under surveillance. And you're wasting your business, your planes, the miles on your planes, the fuel it takes to gas up, the manpower, all of that's entailed in maintaining a whole airport. And you're concentrating on my vagina, using that. And yeah, no, you're losing that airport. Those are those are murderers, and they need to not have access to an airport. It is a threat to national security, and that's exactly what's going to happen when you are engaged in kidnapping, which the Ontario International Airport is. You're going to be removed from existence. The entities engaging in this, and that's how you're targeting terrorism in the United States, by the way. These are domestic terrorists. You're going to shut it down. All right, it is currently 8:36 p.m. I want to go ahead and recite to you the address of these sex offenders that are engaged in what is coming out of their mother's basements to gang stalk me by sitting in front of what is referred to as light while they're in darkness. That's an ironic name. The entities engaged in what is a bunch of psychopaths getting together, molesting with engineer light. Those are mentally ill. That's the mentally ill that are sitting around on a table in front of light, gang stalking, while also playing cards, pogs, whatever they're doing. You can Google pogs if you're too young to know what that is. Might be aging myself right now. But they're demons nonetheless. So that's why I am referring to them in the manner that light is located at 434 North Lemon Avenue in Ontario, California. They're gang stalking, and the entity is engaging what is stalking using commercial planes, which is evidence against light as well, against everybody that is I'm documenting. This is the entity that's very highly unintelligent, but again, you're dealing with demonic spirits. You're dealing with what are inherently inferior spiritual creatures. So that is the intellectual superiority clearly exhibited by the P.O.C. And that is glory to God. That's Christ Jesus. I'm not even taking claim for that. It is currently 8:38 p.m. This is P.O.C. The entity is engaged in targeting and doing so while I am leaving the OVITT Family Community Library. And this is documentation of, again, the podcast is documentation proving since I started this podcast in 2020, the documentation of the government stalking me, following me around from place to place. And that's what this podcast is for. P.O.C. All right, this is the entity that's gang stalking, and this is assault with a deadly weapon. 8ZNY193. This is the entity that's gang stalking. You're not missing. This is Engineer Light. She knows. That's a threat by the entity that's gang stalking. This is my shadow here. Here's another shadow over here. And here's my shadow here. This is surveillance, and that's a threat by the entity that is engaging in this. Amazon Prime did the same thing. It's assault with a deadly weapon. That's federal prison. All right, this is P.O.C. It's currently 8:41 p.m. That is federal prison right there. All right, this is what an entity is doing to American citizens, and you're getting the news report that they were just hit by a car, but they're being targeted, and they have the audacity to tell somebody about it or try to document it or something, and the next thing you know that they're dead, they've been hit by a car. Yeah, that's what the entity is doing right now. That's an unlawful threat, and that's a demon as well, while the entity is stalking by planes, okay? Gauging this evidence right now, stalking with light activity, this is the entity that's going to federal prison. Again, that license plate, that's relevant to what the entity is engaging in with malice, and that's the airport that's being shut down. That's stalking. Clearly moving north as I move north. See the images when I'm in the parking lot? They were flying closer to the parking lot, flying closer to ARCO as I'm over here, and doing so while I am documenting. This is the Nephilim that's engaging in that. This is the entity that's also psychopathic and is going to regret it when it's in court. But right now, they're engaging in what is communicating a threat. While doing so, this is supposed to be a statement by a demon that's going to federal prison. Okay, assault with a deadly weapon, that's committed with the intent to obstruct justice while the pedophiles are playing cards at light. For the entities doing so, again, this is ARCO at 434 North Euclid Avenue, where that airport is gang stalking at 7 in the morning at this address, and doing so at 6:47 in the evening, where the fake sun is rising and setting. That airport is being shut down. Everybody on the airport board and everybody on the executive team, they're being removed. Those are terrorists that are engaging in what is targeting, and I read their names on the podcast, and they're going to be removed from position, and they're going to not make money anymore for terrorism, and the entity is engaging in what is the loss of an entire airport that's engaged in terrorism. This is P.O.C, and that's the conduct of the Nephilim. That's the conduct of the Nephilim. This is the demon-possessed P.O.C. All right, the Ontario International Airport is publishing that on today, September 26, 2025, that at 8:40 p.m., the Southwest Airlines is flight number WN3253 going to Sacramento from gate 403 is expected to depart from the Ontario International Airport. The entity is, and also, let me also see it, there's another one at 9:04 p.m. There's one at 8:30 p.m., Southwest Airlines, which was flight WN2244 going toward Las Vegas, gate 404. And that stating that that one is late at 8:39 p.m. And also the update, and this is, let me see, 8:40 p.m. Looks like that one's scheduled on time. And this is the screenshot of what the Ontario International Airport is reflecting, what it's representing to the public at 6:09 p.m. is when I took this screenshot regarding what the public is reasonably relying upon regarding the business of flights that are planned much in advance, that people are paying money for, regarding the entity that is arriving and departing. I am capturing the video that you just listened to of the entity threatening my life by engaging what is assault with a deadly weapon, which is a documented pattern. The entity doing this when I filed my civil case against the state of California in San Bernardino, California. This is, again, a Latina female that is literally hitting my property. She is continuously driving through the red light by keeping her head turned the opposite direction, and I'm looking at her continuously driving in slow motion, but she continuously is driving, looking in the opposite direction, and she ends up damaging my property. This is when I was bringing my civil case against the state of California, which Thomas Garza and the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department that engaged in what is kidnapping with the same entity, with the Ontario International Airport that's gang stalking. They committed kidnapping together. They were monitoring together with Jason Knight and Lester Keys. They engaged in that, and doing so with the entity that's engaging what is threatening you, trying to murder you, obstruct justice while you document it. This is the entity that engaged in that. Amazon Prime engaging in what is assault with a deadly weapon, monitoring with the intent to obstruct justice because they're harassing me and I'm documenting it. Doing that on what is Plum and Hope Boulevard, as I documented via podcast as well. Amazon Prime engaging in that, and I'm documenting the entity engaging what is assault with a deadly weapon in Upland, California at the intersection of D Street and Euclid Avenue, while the entity is again hostile to my documentation and have engaged in this over the term of years that I've documented it. The entity is engaging in what is, and I'm not talking about, you've seen me document when the entity is sitting at a stop sign, sitting at a red light, or even when I'm looking at them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when I have the right of way and the entity is speeding toward me. They're not surprised by where I'm at. They're tracking my steps. That's what you know about the fake sun. That's what you know about the engineered light. That's what you know about the gang stalking by the police and the entity using helicopters and stalking in the path while the people of the state, they're not surprised by me. And that's not what's going on when the entity is engaging in that. This demon is speeding into the street to hit me or threaten me with hitting me. That's a threat that the demon engaged in. And I'm documenting her license plate. That is federal prison. And the government punctuates that. And this is very foolish. Repeating it again, by the way, at what is 8:48 p.m., flying over. The entity is engaging, they're stalking. And when they engage in stalking, they're communicating a threat, and that's a documented act of obstruction of justice while you know you're being documented and you know where I'm at, where the fake son is tracking my steps. They're all tracking my steps. Their knowledge is already exposed. Their malice and their obsessive stalking is already exposed. The entities that's engaging in what is stalking you while your shadow is above your head in engineer light, that's speaking to specific knowledge. So you are intentionally speeding into the street to communicate a threat while you're hostile about what I just documented, about the investigation of pilots that are going to prison. And then the pilots engaging in what is stalking me while the entity is threatening me with a vehicle that's speeding in front of me while my shadow is surrounding me. This is the entity that's going to prison for that. Okay, so I want to make sure that you're aware of that. The entity is doing so. Again, I'm going to put this on X because this is exactly what is relevant to targeting terrorists. The entity is acting with impunity. The entity engaging in what are multiple documented acts of obstruction of justice. This is violence that the entity engaged in. This is why the Ontario Police is being disbanded, because they're gang stalking with this population. They share in that violence. In fact, the entity gang stalks just like the entity did by the airport. I've documented the Ontario Police Department gang stalking in that manner, while the people of the state engage in some act of violence because they're hostile. This is the Nephilim. These are murderers, these are pedophiles, these are serial killers, okay? They're engaging in, again, they're demons though, and they require each other. And as I'm showing you, as I document them and I bully them intellectually and I bully them with evidence and I outsmart them, showing them how ignorant they are to be under a fake sun, they're the ones that get hostile and violent and they're going to prison for it. Okay, I documented that terrorist license plate, and she's targeting with the city of Ontario. That's federal prison. And you're engaged in what is not an act of negligence. It's an act of malice. It's in the specific environment where surveillance is underway. That's not negligence, okay? The entity is engaging in this conduct and doing so pursuant to what is my ongoing documentation, and there's a pattern of the entity engaging in what is threatening me, threatening my life and safety. The Ontario Police stealing my vehicle when I'm filing my civil case. That's what the entity is engaging in 2019. The entity engaging in what is denying justice, a default judgment, when they did not respond to my case, Erica Spencer v. Bill and Wags, because the entity thought it was a joke, and when they didn't respond to it within the 30 days that you're supposed to after a summons, then I am going to the court, and the entity is engaging in what is denying me a default judgment. They stole my car as well. The same Ontario Police that knew that it wasn't abandoned in the first place. You've been gang stalking just like they are every day. You're going to understand and recognize what the statements that they made when they stole my car based on the pattern of conduct speaking to what they know, contrary to the lies that they told. And those demons are going to prison for it. The officer that engaged in stealing my car, the people of the state, Bill and Wags, there's no statute of limitations. The Ontario Police have been engaged in gang stalking and kidnapping, knowing exactly who I am and knowing that I'm conducting an investigation, documenting them. And they engaged in what is an egregious act of obstruction of justice, not just my car, but everything inside of my car. And you know who they did that for? They did that for Jason Fields. They did that for the federal government. They did that for Tracy Banks. They did that for their own interest with regard to the entity that's a thief, stealing my identity, stealing my intellectual property, violating my privacy as an entity that's engaged in surveillance and doesn't want me to expose that. They're going to prison. For these acts of obstruction, prison is the sentence. Understand that. You're not going to go around murdering American citizens, hitting them with your car. You're not going to go around psychologically torturing American citizens, stalking them as a police department while the people of the state beat them up in an alley. You're going to federal prison for it. These are the tactics of the demon-possessed. These are the tactics of the Nephilim. And the entity's engaging in that right now. I documented it, stalking by plane in that video. She's going to prison. And the airport is not an airport, and therefore it's being shut down. And this is an entity that is psychopathic in the moment, feeling good about, we're going to go over. That's the entity that's engaging in psychological torture and threatening together. But I'm documenting it, and I'm going to prosecute you. And it's speaking to what is removing that airport altogether. And pilots that are gang stalking, engaging in terrorism, going to prison, federal prison, being committed into asylums. This is P.O.C. So this is the entity that's doing so. Like I documented, again, that's also relevant. While I am capturing this podcast right now, 8:48 p.m. And with regard to what is published on the Ontario International website, this is 8:40 p.m. Southwest Airlines again. And the next one would be at, looks like 9:10 p.m., 9:11 p.m. Nothing like what the Ontario International Airport engages in. 8:40 p.m. and then 30 seconds later, another plane, and then 37 seconds later, another plane, and then 90 seconds later, another plane, and then as I begin uploading it, another 60 seconds, another plane. Nothing like that is reflected. That sort of frequency isn't reflected on the Ontario International website. That's the entity that's engaging what is targeting me, targeting what I'm doing, targeting what I'm uploading, and also targeting with demons that are engaging what is assault and battery, with the intent to obstruct justice while you're stalking with the state. That's criminal conduct by the state. Okay, this is the entity that's doing so, and the entity that's stalking as I'm capturing this podcast at 8:48 p.m. There are no published flights, and there would be no published flights, arrivals, and departures that would be hovering over ARCO at 434 North Euclid Avenue. Okay, that's the entity that's engaging what is gang stalking together at the traffic light. License plate. Oh, no front plate. That's criminal summoning. That's the fire department that's being removed. License 8 W.S.C. 669. Gang stalking Chevron and gang stalking ARCO. All of them aiming light. License 9RXY286. And these are the demons that engage in assault with a deadly weapon on behalf of that corrupt government that's using police trucks and sirens to stalk and monitor me. 8PFR447 29927L3. And again, the ARCO employee 8EIP592. The entity is engaging in what is the pattern of conduct, engaging what is assault with a deadly weapon on behalf of that entity that's engaging what is the criminal misuse of emergency vehicles. You see that video that has my shadows surrounding me? That's the context regarding Michael GERKEN's criminal use of emergency vehicles while he's engaged in surveillance, not firefighting. All right, license plate. Gang stalking at Chevron is again the employee 7XIY347 and license 8XLN046. Gang stalking at gas pump number 1 while the entity is engaging what is massive facilitation. Okay, and that's just on this side of the street because you already know about Starbucks. I documented them very thoroughly between June and July of 2025 following the kidnapping that this entity committed. Okay, that's not changing the subject. The entity engages in that when I speak to evidence that's very damning. This is an entity that engages in assault and deadly weapon on behalf of the government, and the government's going to be prosecuted for it. The entity is tracking my steps, knows exactly where I'm at. In Engineer Light, you know where I'm at. Under the fake sun, you know where I'm at. And you are engaged in what is a malicious threat to my life and safety. And this is the entity that engages in a documented pattern of that. Okay, while I've been engaged in what is this ongoing public investigation, which they are also mindful of. And the entity is doing so on video with the airport that has no published flights, and none of those published flights include hovering over ARCO. Okay, or over the parking lot of the Ontario Downtown Luxury Apartments. None of that. Okay, and an investigation, the prosecution is also going to prove that. This is the entity that's engaging in that, and that's going to be published on X. The entity is also engaged in criminal summoning because of what I'm publishing onto the X channel, and so are all of these demons gang stalking at gas stalls because of what I'm publishing on the internet, which they're monitoring online. That's the Ontario Fire Department engaged in federal stalking, okay? Molesting, license 9PBC395, so is ARCO at 434 North Euclid Avenue. They're molesting me with a demon that's gang stalking at the establishment. 9GZG256, a sex offender molesting with Engineer Light, with the demon that's molesting at the establishment, gang stalking at gas pumps number 8, aiming light toward me, molesting while they're monitoring on the internet. This is shared by the City of Ontario, which is a sex offender. This is the same entity unlawfully touching me, engaging what is a sexual assault and battery while they are touching me in my sleep. Actually, that will be a battery because I'm asleep, so you're not conscious, aware of it. You wake up to that violation of your person. So the entity is engaging what is sexually touching me, removing my covering. These are the demons that are molesting with light, engaging in that, engaging criminal summoning, engaging what is assault with a deadly weapon, and they do so while you are documenting them. These are the serial killers, the pedophiles, the stalkers that are acting in furtherance of murder. Okay, this is P.O.C. The entity is engaging what is monitoring what's being uploaded onto X right now, and doing so with the intent it's going up on the internet. But let me go ahead and remind you about the demon that's relevant for federal prison, license 8ZNY193. This appears to be a Latina female driving a white Toyota. She's engaged in what is not an act of negligence. She's engaged in what is an unlawful act threatening my life and safety, a malicious act of violence pursuant to what is gang stalking with the City of Ontario. That's also engaged in what is the federal offense of criminal summoning. This is the entity that is losing what is not a real fire department, losing what is not a real legitimate airport, and certainly is losing what is not a police department either. All of the departments in Ontario are engaged in surveillance in furtherance of murder, and these criminal means of surveillance are going to be removed altogether, and this is relevant to deportation, okay? The gang stalkers that are engaged in this pattern of conduct are doing so in furtherance of murder and kidnapping, just like the people of the state exhibit. This demon with license plate, again, 8ZNY193, that is relevant to federal prison, as is every criminal act of violence committed by the government, through the people of the state who know exactly who you are. They know where you are. There are no accidents, and it's not negligence. It is malice, where you are supposed to be ignorant of surveillance, and then it could be falsely depicted regarding what actually happened to someone else. I've already proven the knowledge of the entity. I've already proven the pattern of conduct. That is speaking to what an entity is doing. It's not irrelevant, and it's not in a vacuum, and no one forgot the fact that I'm documenting the government. The government engages in what is threatening you by driving full speed ahead as though they're going to hit you with a car. That's an assault with a deadly weapon in furtherance of what is the conspiracy to commit murder, and there is no such accidents. And they're doing so on behalf of the state. And I have a body of evidence documenting that very pattern, that very character of inflicting harm because they are sex offenders, because they are stalkers, because they are the Nephilim that did not want to be identified specifically. Okay? That's P.O.C. It is currently, the entity is maintaining ongoing light activity. Those are demons and fire trucks. They're maintaining light activity at F Street and Euclid Avenue. It's criminal summoning. All right, P.O.C. The light activity in the video is where you're seeing my shadow that surrounds me. Michael GERKEN's not engaged in anything other than domestic terrorism. He's engaged in what is surveillance. And that's why that fire department is a waste of money. Criminal expenditure of funds. And the Ontario City Council is also accountable for the criminal activity of the City of Ontario. And that's also why Paul Leon's being removed from office. And that fire department is being removed. It's a waste. They don't even need a fire department. Everything that they're doing is pursuant to monitoring me. And who are they running off to do a health check to? Who are they running off to go while they set fires to keep themselves employed? It's about gang stalking. It's about surveillance. And it is a waste of resources, as it turns out, and the City of Ontario is going to pay accordingly. It is currently 9:01 p.m. The entity is engaged in what is monitoring online on the venue of the internet, the ARCO website, the ARCO network, Wi-Fi network. And that is ARCO guest, where they're monitoring right now, and that's relevant to the entity sounding sirens and crossing path. License 7MFU484. Understand that this entity, whose license plate I read, that is a third party that acts on behalf of the entity. The entire entity commits assault with a deadly weapon. In the same way that the entire entity commits what is harassment. The entity speaks. The entity acts as one. The entity engages in sexual violence as one. Okay, so I want to make sure that that is clear. This is, again, 9:02 p.m. Engaging in what is assault with a deadly weapon, engaging in what is criminal summoning, license plate 6CRW580, and deportation may very well apply there. It is currently 9:02 p.m. This is P.O.C. I will include on the X what you're going to look at. The entity that's stalking me by commercial planes is doing so pursuant to what has nothing to do with any sort of arrivals and departures from the airport. Neither, and it's also part of the assault and battery that I'm subject to by this third party. They're acting in concert together in a specific environment, and it's also that which is occurring outside of what is published on the website. Okay, and now I'm going to share that which is published on the website of the Ontario International Airport that is gang stalking me in furtherance of murder, and it is going to be the removal of the Ontario International Airport. This is P.O.C. It's 9:02. License plates. Stalking, monitoring, trying to slow down the internet as it's being uploaded. Let me see, 5ZCT780. And cool transport. License plate 77989X2. 4KRF259. This is ongoing monitoring after they commit assault with a deadly weapon. The entity surrounding with the Ontario Fire Department maintaining light activity at F Street and Euclid. This is surrounding with light activity while they're, it's going on the internet anyway, but this is what the entity does after they commit criminal acts that are documented, and then they engage in an ongoing competition trying to slow, this is the mentally ill. Even if you slow it down, does everybody listening to the sound of my voice recognize that it's still going on the internet? Whether I get it up there in 17 minutes or 17 seconds, if it's still going on the internet, what is the purpose with regard to what you lose, which is your freedom, your reputation, your life? Very much of them are, again, they're engaged in what is spiritually attacking, and this is very petty, very little results. It's not stopping. It never has. But you're dealing with the Nephilim. You're dealing with demonic spirits. You're not dealing with logic. You're not dealing with intelligence. You're dealing with desperation. Okay, you're dealing with delusion. 9TAA681. but it's going on the internet. This is what they do. They stalk me by helicopter. They do it for 15, 20 minutes, and then they engage in what is gang stalking, ongoing monitoring, molestation with impossible light, more helicopter activity to then slow it down. So you do it, but then you don't want it on the internet. But you know what's going on the internet because I put everything on the internet. And so while you're engaged in what is trying to stop me from putting it on the internet, by your same pattern of conduct, which I've already explained is relevant to surveillance on the internet, you are thereby demonstrating the fact that you're engaged in surveillance, and you know that you're also being documented while you commit these acts of terrorism. This is the entity that is, again, lacking in the intelligence quotient area, okay? Very low intelligence, okay? And this is, like I said, no matter how educated you may think someone is, or how experienced, or I'm telling you, with the demon possessed, they're dummies. These are dummies. And that's what happens when you are a part of Satan's so-called club. They're not elite or sophisticated or intelligent. These are dummies. They are all subscribing to the same idiocy, stalking under a fake sun. Stalking when you're doing it to somebody that is not the ordinary. I am not everybody else. I'm prosecuting you, and you still haven't caught on to that? You had a long time to catch on to what my pattern is, because I've been paying attention to yours. The entity is engaging in what is very foolish behavior, and they're going to pay severe prices, severe penalty for it. Okay? But nonetheless, this is the entity that's engaging in that and is doing so while I am documenting it. The documentation is published. It's 9:10 p.m. License 8THY241, in case I didn't read that license plate. And Cool Transports is engaged in... that this is what the entity is doing all the time, stalking at light in the parking lot. I documented them. They have a demon with their brake lights aimed toward me. They have a demon in the parking lot, not looking for a parking spot. They're aiming light in this direction. The Ontario Fire Department has light activity using the fire trucks at F Street and Euclid. The Coal Transports is maintaining light activity. They're surrounding the perimeter with light activity. And these demons are engaged in light activity. It's not traffic. These are demons that are stalking. This is how invested the Nephilim are. This is the reality of the condition of those that are around. This is monitoring. This is not everyday normal life. None of this is. Okay? This is the Nephilim. These are the demon possessed. This is ongoing ceaseless monitoring. License 9SHR784. This is P.O.C. And the Nephilim make up the Ontario Fire Department. The Ontario Fire Department that's engaged in criminal surveillance. And since you're not a fire department, since you're not actually passionate and engaged in that, you're not going to exist anymore. Okay? The entity is engaging in this conduct and is doing so pursuant to what is federal stalking on the venue of the internet. And the entity is engaging in conduct that is very foolish with regard to the prospects of a federal prosecution. Okay? But nonetheless, I couldn't ask for a better defendant. Okay? Not that I don't mind a challenge. Okay? You could have been, at an average level of intelligence, but this is an entity that's full of dummies. It's not a numbers game. Okay? You can have millions and millions of idiots. That doesn't make one mighty person. It doesn't. They're a bunch of idiots that are all going down. All of them. It's currently 9:12 p.m. This is P.O.C. Molesting, sex offender, license 9GVR028, and license 7DWS964. Molesting. These are sex offenders. And Starbucks, again, a sex offender. So is the Ontario Police, sex offender. They're crossing path. They're monitoring. They're engaged in criminal summoning with the Ontario Fire Department. They're monitoring with Cool Transports that's maintaining light activity. They're doing so while the entity commits assault with a deadly weapon. The Ontario Police are monitoring with that. They incentivize that violence. They are gang stalking me pursuant to the people of the state that engage in that violence with that department. That's why they're being shut down. And they're engaged in criminal activity right now, engaging in surveillance by driving an engineer light and crossing path, and doing so monitoring me. And they're also doing so while they're conspicuously stalking as a police department. You go straight to federal prison for that. It's currently 9:15 p.m. License plate, molesting, sex offender 8PTU048, and sex offender license 9BJZ453. All together sharing an assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to obstruct justice as well. Ontario International Airport, gang stalking by flying over the parking lot, flying in alignment with where my person is situated on the sidewalk, where I'm showing you how you're looking at the entity that is clearly stalking, gang stalking in particular. Gang stalking is about being in the path, also being in the path with light. This is where the entity is doing so also by clearly stalking because there's no arrivals or departures scheduled. None of it's published online, and it's also not going to include hovering over the parking lot of the downtown Ontario luxury apartments. This is P.O.C. It's 9:21 p.m. when the entity is engaging in that, and I just want to go over what the entity published thus far with regard to departures. It is currently 9:21 p.m. And there is a flight scheduled at 9:11 p.m. by Volaris. That would be gate Y4 1863. Let me get this license. Stalking me with the airport. 8KFW049. Molesting. Okay, stalking, engaging criminal summoning with the Ontario Fire Department. The entity is engaging what is this flight that is at 9:21 p.m. and it's not even a flight that's going anywhere. They flew in alignment to me hovering and doing so, and then made a U-turn. That's not a departure from the airport or an arrival, a landing. The entity is stalking in the path. Okay, engaging what is aerial surveillance. And it's psychopathic while they do so, and this is the airport that's going to cease to exist, okay? And also what's not published is any flight at 9:22 p.m. where the entity is maintaining another flight as I document the pattern of psychopaths that engage in more evidence of stalking while they're documented stalking, okay? This is P.O.C. This is Alan D. WAPNER. This is the entity that's engaged in what is terrorism using the airport. So now flying straight over the street. Seconds after, again, there's no flights this frequent published on the website, okay? That was 30 seconds, 35, 45 seconds ago. Another flight that's not doing a donut, but hovering still, and hovering over the ARCO where I'm located. This is an entity that's engaged in what is surveillance. It's federal stalking under Title 18, federal stalking with the people of the state, who I'm capturing images of, criminal activity on the roads and the highways. None of this is constitutionally protected. The government has no warrant, no probable cause, as the system of surveillance is exposed, and it's also mental illness, and you need to know how the Nephilim are engaged in targeting you. They're targeting you in an engineered environment, and they're psychopaths that are stalking with light, stalking in planes and helicopters, engaging in what are acts of violence while you identify them as the demons that they are. They are appropriately referred to by a name, which is the Nephilim, and they commit acts of violence like assault with a deadly weapon when you identify them as demons who are stalking you in furtherance of murder. License plate 8FFF63, I believe. I can't really see that one. That's P.O.C. There's no train. That's Union Pacific, however, that's going to be prosecuted for federal stalking, but there's no train. It's amplified in volume, and I have video where I'm standing in front of the train, and it's not sounding that loudly. That's amplified audible activity, criminal facilitation of these demons that are stalking. Okay, and they're stalking as an airport. Okay, the entities engaging in what is criminal activity, and what you use to engage in terrorism is what you lose to engage in while you engaged in that. The entities losing the fire department, losing the police department, losing the airport. This is corruption regarding terrorism in the city of Ontario, and you're not going to sacrifice people to try to build up some raggedy city that's going to burn up anyway because they're full of demons. All right, this is 9:24 p.m. The entity maintaining another flight. There you go, back here. Gang stalking. None of this is published on the website. Again, 9:24 p.m. Yeah, I've been speaking for 4 minutes. So 9:20, 9:21, 9:24, engaging what is just doing donuts and U-turns. That has nothing to do with what's published on the website. This is the entity maintaining surveillance while the entity is maintaining light activity and maintaining presence. And there is nothing that you can do. You can then fly behind me while I'm speaking to the fact of your pattern of flying in alignment to me. You're still in alignment to me while you are flying in the parking lot. That's a line as well. The entity is engaged in what is flying in perfect alignment with me, however, when I am pointing out their pattern. And what is also their pattern? While I point out what their pattern is, they engage in real time seeking to and failing at trying to rebut it, because if you were rebutting it, then you wouldn't be flying over here in the first place, because there are no planes that are taking off from the airport or landing, hovering over the hovering over the San Bernardino County Housing Authority, hovering over Lemon Avenue, hovering over ARCO at 434 North Euclid Avenue, hovering over the downtown Ontario luxury apartments. That would be a rebuttal if you weren't doing that at all. That's not a rebuttal. That's the entity that's, again, idiotic. Oh, we're not stalking you. We're going to fly over the same parking lot, but we're going to fly behind where you just said we typically fly, because that's evidence of us not targeting. Yeah, okay? Because pilots are taking off at the parking lot over Lemon Avenue, but they are taking off over Euclid Avenue. Like, this is the inept, okay? The Nephilim are the inept, and this is a threat, okay? This is a threat because this is the entity that does not use any brain power to murder people. They don't use any brain power to bully people. They don't use any brain power with regard to getting away with bearing false witness and setting people up. And it doesn't take any. Clearly, they don't have it, okay? And this is the entity that's being very severely scrutinized while they're gang stalking. And so is the Ontario Police Department. You'll see them crossing paths. And who's gang stalking with the Ontario Police? That's relevant to federal prison, all right? Because they're threatening you and stalking with the police together. License, that police department that's being shut down, 9GLE 293. 9GIK 306, aiming light on me, a sex offender, doing so by gang stalking at the intersection. And so is Starbucks that committed a kidnapping with that agency. And they're going to prison. Let me remind you about their names again. Ocean, Amelia, Patty, they're going to prison for kidnapping. AWAM 326. And that is for the protection of the public. They're the Nephilim that run a company named Starbucks. Starbucks is engaged in what is hiring the Nephilim. Starbucks is a demonic company and engaging in terrorism. That's why they committed a kidnapping with that demon operating Ontario Police Department representing that agency. That's stalking with the City of Ontario maintaining aerial surveillance from the airport that has nothing published on the website about any planes taking off or arriving at 9:20 p.m. Neither is that going to include hovering over this location where I'm at, where they're engaged in obsessing over me. Sex offenders. An airport that's being exposed as a sex offender and committing kidnappings is an airport that shall be no more. Okay? And that's, again, 8XNL, 8XNB 495, molesting. The entity is engaging in what is surveillance, and since the entity has demonstrated, the federal government has witnessed the City of Ontario prove and demonstrate that they don't need the police department, the fire department, or the airport, that's exactly what they're going to lose, because they engaged in kidnapping through all of the above. Okay? License plate, sex offender, molesting. Engaging in criminal summoning, engaging in what is an assault and battery, and engaging in the perpetual sex offense, 94409E4. And that's an entity doing so in furtherance of murder and gang stalking with Chevron at 506 North Euclid Avenue on cameras at 9:27 p.m. It's currently 9:27 p.m. where the entity is engaging in what is gang stalking, and what is published is and the Google Drive is where you can see what is shared by the Ontario International Airport. This is all a part of the prosecution. The airport is being shut down for what pilots are proven to not be engaging in, which is speaking to targeting an American citizen. And that is proven through the location where these planes are maintaining presence over me, the frequency that I'm documenting, the ongoing audible activity of it, the disturbance in the neighborhood, the public nuisance that they are committing. They're doing so in the specific environment. It is beyond a public nuisance. It is terrorism, relevant to psychological torture, and the entity is also very highly unintelligent. This is the Nephilim, though, that have been intellectually bullied, if you will, for a public purpose, for a principal purpose, for a exposure, and for a prosecutorial purpose, okay? But this is an entity that you need to know is not concerned with intelligence. They tell each other that they're elite. They tell each other that they're big and bad. They tell each other that it's okay to engage in criminal conduct and to do the egregious things that they do, and all of them are losers. All of them. They're up in the middle of the night literally stalking me. And I'm not sleeping outside because I'm a loser. I'm sleeping outside because I have to prosecute the government in order for the government to mind its business. That's why I'm sleeping outside. And there are very specific people who are going to federal prison for that. And they're going to be sleeping on concrete and in steel, within steel walls. They're going to prison. And that's because, understand, even while I'm not being kidnapped per se right now, what is since 2018, 7 years of homelessness, if you will, except for Alvarado Gardens. But 7 years altogether. This is outside of my doing. I went to college, I went to law school, I took the California bar. I am supposed to be a licensed attorney well into what is a very fruitful and productive career. The entity's been engaged in targeting me. You're going to prison for this. It's also relevant. This is not freedom because I'm not being kidnapped inside of one of the state facilitating venues right now. It is still ongoing prison, if you will, while I'm being gang stalked. Not only while I'm being kidnapped inside of any facility, but also while I am being gang stalked outside of the walls of a facility, and you're going to prison for it. And you have over 7 years of documentation of this entity engaging in what is keeping an American citizen in a bubble, trying to accomplish murdering them to shut them up. And it didn't work, and you're going to prison for it. You are going to federal prison. The airport is going to be removed for it. The police department is going to be removed for it. The fire department is going to be removed for it. Engaging in assault and battery, you're going to federal prison for it. Okay, and every other act that I've been subject to while the entity stole what is 7 years, and that's just of documentation. I'm not even addressing the entity, the people of the state, when I'm on job interviews and they're harassing me at the interviews, and I don't even know that I'm being gang stalked. So I don't know, and I'm also not documenting all the acts of discrimination and harassment that I'm subject to by going for a job where Tracy Banks is engaged in what is meeting up with people and cutting off. And remember, Tracy Banks represents an entity. Okay, so because she's violating my privacy and doing so with the Upland Police and doing so with the Riverside Police when we're in Moreno Valley, the entity that's engaged in what is surveillance at every apartment complex where I'm at, the entity that's engaged in what is discriminating against me regarding housing when I'm trying to get an apartment to move out, to live on my own, to study for the bar. This is the people of the state that engage in that. This is the entity that is, in every regard, responsible for everything that I remain subject to as a matter of documentation over 7 years. You are going to federal prison if you don't understand. While the entity is stalking by police and helicopter and fire, have a field day because you're going to prison for it. It's a very high cost. Very high cost. And I diligently documented because you targeted a federal prosecutor. I don't have to be hired by the feds in order to federally prosecute you. Clearly. And what I said has happened, that's exactly what's going to happen. You're going to prison. It's currently 9:32 p.m. This is P.O.C. We got a demon speeding down the street in a white van. Let's get this demon's license plate. License 18065R2. These are two Caucasians, a white male driving, and it looks like a female in operation for a communication device. Oh no, these are two males. He looks like a girl. They certainly are acting like girls. It is currently 9:32 p.m. This is P.O.C. They're gang stalking. They look like they're on assignment, by the way. They are gang stalking the entities. They all are gang stalking, but I just mean these two demons look particularly anxious, eager to be documented for a prosecution. License plate. It's 9:32 p.m. Gang stalking at gas stalls number 8 and gas stall number 7. Yeah, that would be 9D-MX440 and 8MKC849. The entity is engaged in surveillance on behalf of the state. So, and the entities engaged in all this, Starbucks, Chevron, ARCO, there's no warrant or probable cause for these businesses to engage in surveillance, and that's what they're doing. It's a federal RICO case. License 8PEK537. Delta Airlines, Southwest Airlines, Frontier Airlines, UPS, Amazon Prime Air, they have no warrant or probable cause to maintain surveillance with the state, and that's exactly what they're doing. It's a federal RICO case, and it's a vast one and an elaborate one. 94409E4 and 7XIY347, gang stalking at Chevron. This is P.O.C., and this is the entity that committed assault with a deadly weapon because they don't like the truth that those demons, and I mean this in the nicest possible manner, because not all geeks, I consider myself to be a nerd, and nerds can be totally cool and sexy. There's nothing wrong with that. I love being studious, but these are a different type of breed. These are demons. This is the Nephilim. These are rejects. They're sitting around playing cards, and they're gang stalking me, obsessed with what it is that I'm doing while they're sitting in the middle of the night. And this is, again, the likes of those that are sitting around masturbating to child porn. The entity doesn't like that description, so you engage in assault and battery with a deadly weapon, and you'll be documented for that. You're going to prison. The entity is engaged in what is conduct because you don't immediately answer for it, because you don't see the result, the penalties at that moment, that and then you forget about it, and nobody's forgotten about it. Nobody's forgotten it, and it's a very real penalty because you don't like the truth. You sit around in your mother's basement masturbating to child porn while you're gang stalking me and molesting me with engineer light and get out the car like nothing is happening. That's mental illness, and those are the perverts that have a tendency to engage in sex crimes such as pedophilia and enjoying pedophilia. Okay, that's what's gang stalking. That's the Nephilim sitting around at light gang stalking me, and engaging in assault with a deadly weapon is not helping you. But that's the truth. It is currently 9:34 p.m. Those are indeed the sex offenders that are engaging in gang stalking, sitting around monitoring, and then engaging in what is quote unquote responding to it by violence, which I'm documenting because you who are going to prison, you're going to prison for all of the above. P.O.C. It's 9:35 p.m. All right, Chevron engaging in the perpetual sex offense with all of the demons that are under the guise of being customers, engage in the repeated sex offense over and over again, molesting, and doing so again while hostile demons that engage in assault and battery with a deadly weapon, doing so while I'm uploading the podcast. So that's relevant to the sexual violence they're engaging in, molesting my body. 6SDV135. These are sex offenders, 8YPG291. They're engaged in assault and sexual assault and battery as an entity. So is license 00630J3. These are, and so is 7XIY347. This is the male employee at the Chevron engaged in that sex offense together. So is Cool Transport, so is ARCO, so is Starbucks, et cetera, et cetera. This is where I'm at. That's where the sex offender is going while they are molesting me en route to that venue and engaging in federal stalking, acting further into the conspiracy to commit murder, doing so with the intent to obstruct justice, doing so on behalf of the state and facilitating that. It's currently 9:38 p.m. Again, this is relevant to the perpetual sex offenders you're prosecuting that. P.O.C. Alright, this is the entity that's gang stalking, and this is assault with a deadly weapon. 8ZNY193. This is the entity that's gang stalking. You're not missing. This is Engineer Light. She knows. That's a threat by the entity that's gang stalking. This is my shadow here. Here's another shadow over here. And here's my shadow here. This is surveillance, and that's a threat by the entity that is engaging in this. Amazon Prime did the same thing. It's assault with a deadly weapon. That's federal prison. All right, this is P.O.C. It's currently 8:41 p.m. That is federal prison right there. All right, this is what an entity is doing to American citizens, and you're getting the news report that they were just hit by a car, but they're being targeted, and they have the audacity to tell somebody about it or try to document it or something, and the next thing you know that they're dead, they've been hit by a car. Yeah, that's what the entity is doing right now. That's an unlawful threat, and that's a demon as well, while the entity is stalking by planes, okay? Engaging this evidence right now, stalking with light activity, this is the entity that's going to federal prison. Again, that license plate, that's relevant to what the entity is engaging in with malice, and that's the airport that's being shut down. That's stalking. Clearly moving north as I move north. See the images when I'm in the parking lot? They were flying closer to the parking lot, flying closer to ARCO as I'm over here, and doing so while I am documenting. This is the Nephilim that's engaging in that. This is the entity that's also psychopathic and is going to regret it when it's in court. But right now, they're engaging in what is communicating a threat. While doing so, this is supposed to be a statement by a demon that's going to federal prison. Okay, assault with a deadly weapon, that's committed with the intent to obstruct justice while the pedophiles are playing cards at light. For the entity is doing so, again, this is ARCO at 4349 Euclid Avenue, where that airport is gang stalking at 7 in the morning at this address, and doing so at 6:47 in the evening, where the fake sun is rising and setting. That airport is being shut down. Everybody on the airport board and everybody on the executive team, they're being removed. Those are terrorists that are engaging in what is targeting, and I read their names on the podcast, and they're going to be removed from position, and they're going to not make money anymore for terrorism, and the entity is engaging in what is the loss of an entire airport that's engaged in terrorism. This is P.O.C., and that's the conduct of the Nephilim. That's the conduct of the Nephilim. This is the demon-possessed P.O.C. All right, it is, again, 9:44 p.m. The entity repeating the same sex offense over and over again. This is, again, ARCO and Cool Transports. Cool Transports is engaged in what is prolonged facilitation. The license plate, doing so with the airport, the entity starts sounding plane activity. It's not a takeoff. But like I said, license plate 77989X2 is Cool Transport. Let me show you something. And you'll see him. He's crossing path with multiple shadows. All right, in front of him, behind him, then it's behind him, and the entity's flying over the venue where I'm located, where he is monitoring me, and so is the company Cool Transports. Cool Transports is facilitating federal stalking by creating light activity in the engineered environment, and doing so with the airport that is engaged in terrorism. That's why they're hovering over here where there's no arrivals and departures, and they do so at the moment that I begin talking about this gang stalker, okay? Again, this is captured at 9:45 p.m. Cool Transports is engaging in a sex offense while monitoring me. So is ARCO, and so is ARCO's employee, 8EIP592. So is Chevron, so is Gloria's Cochinas, so is the demons that are monitoring, 9EGP437, engaging in the sex offense by engaging as a patron, which is self-identifying criminal conduct. The entity is engaging in this pattern of conduct with the businesses, in other words. UNICARE Healthcare Community, Starbucks at 507 North Euclid Avenue. This is where I'm located, and the entity is repeating that. So I just want to be clear, as I'm publishing the evidence, the entity utilizes what is violence to obstruct justice. This is the entity that's engaged in terrorism. All of those demons in the parking lot, those license plates I read, they're sharing in violence together. They're sharing in stalking with the Ontario International Airport together. That's also why the airport is being shut down. It's massive facilitation. They are enabling millions of people to engage in surveilling me, to engage in sexual violence. That's an inhumane level of sexual violence. Sexual violence is inhumane, period, but it's inhumanity with regard to understanding the quantity, all right, the entity that's engaged in what is violating your privacy, not by one freak weirdo that likes to watch child porn, but monitoring your vagina through everybody inside of that building, through everybody outside of that building, through everybody that lives in that city. The entity that's keeping you under surveillance as a state system. They're all engaged in monitoring you and know what you're doing. And I don't even know them in Modesto, California, but they're engaged in surveillance. Okay, so being the target individual is speaking to what is the absence of any privacy whatsoever. And Cool Transport is sharing in that sex offense. Every demon's license plate that I'm reading, molesting me, engaging in what is assault and battery, understand the companies are sharing in that. The companies are engaging in what is public corruption. They are criminally acting while providing what is, again, they're under the guise of filling up your gas tank while you're gang stalking, coming and providing a service to the venue while you're gang stalking, okay? This is the entity that's sharing in sexual violence, sharing in psychological torture, sharing in harassment and terrorism, and sharing in that sexual violence while I'm being molested perpetually, repeatedly. Cool Transport is sharing in that, and you're going to prosecute businesses for sexually violating you. Okay, that's what Cool Transport is committing. And they're doing it while the Ontario International Airport is monitoring with Cool Transport. At the moment that I begin speaking about Cool Transport, gang stalking, and engaging in what is a sex offense. With these sex offenders that are pacing all around at night, not doing anything other than stalking me. License 8YBS799. License plate. I can't really see that one. And it's 9:47 p.m. This is an entity that resorts to sexual violence while they are adding their name to a roster with regard to the Department of Justice identifying them as terrorists who practice sexual violence as a means of terrorism and furtherance of murder. License plate 7UDR151. This demon goes into the Chevron in order to, this is the guise of maintaining light around the perimeter. So that's what he's doing, abandoning his vehicle with the headlights on. This is the entity, all you're doing is stalking with light. Okay, you could sit in your car stalking with light. You can get out your car for some reason, stalking with light, fill up your gas tank while you're stalking with light. While you're driving by, you're stalking with light. This is the entity that's engaging in that together. Okay, license plate. These are all sex offenders. License 9JNY748. All right, and this and more is keeping my vagina under surveillance. Understand that. License 9PAB204 52287D4. P.O.C. All right, the entity engaging in what is resorting to sexual violence, and this is, again, the sexual assault and battery that a government is going to be prosecuted for, and not the people of the state. All right, while they have minor kids talking about, but I teach a kindergarten and I can't. Good. It's good that you're not going to be able to be around children anymore. That's the point, Satan. This is the entity that's engaging in it with impunity now, doing so with the entity that's engaging in criminal conduct with them right now while they are telling themselves that they're engaged in some sort of act of, you're not defying anything, you're not making any point, you're proving what I've already unilaterally proven through evidence. This is an entity of what are demons who are, their singular focus is me, their obsession is me, and I also happen to be the one that's prosecuting them. So this is, again, a trap. It is a trap because the world needs to know, this nation needs to know who sex offenders are, how you are subject to sexual violence, which you have a right to enforce your rights against. With regard to what are targeting that you need to be able to identify and that you have a right to recover for. This is relevant to the Nephilim that will snuff you out, take your life, harm your children when you're not suspecting them and you don't know that they're around you. And this is the entity that is psychopathic. They engage in such acts of violence. They engage in this without batting an eye. They don't have a conscience. They're already dead. Okay, this is the Nephilim that's engaging in what is this public corruption, the Nephilim that's engaged in gang stalking, the Nephilim that's filling the city of Ontario that are serial killers and pedophiles and thieves and liars. This is, again, no exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. These are the demon-possessed that are engaging in this pattern of conduct, okay? And they are, again, obsessed, engaged in that. None of this is about everyday normal life. They are roaming the streets day and night, stalking me. I am the obsession. I am the focal point of every household, of everything that they are engaged in. They do it together collectively. 6LQZ243. I can't really see that one. But that is a homosexual. That's a female, looks like an Asian woman, and she's lurking in the street stalking me. And that's just the reality of the demon possessed. And that's a very disturbing reality that you need to be aware of, okay? And the entity likes to touch all over my body. This is relevant to their obsession with me. They like to do so when I'm in an unconscious state. That's the conduct of rapists. Anybody engaged in what are acts of violence while I'm being, understand, under facts of terrorism by the state, you're talking about federal prison. So when you're gang stalking, you are engaging in what is a federal offense. You're engaged in terrorism. Now, when you're engaged in terrorism, gang stalking, and furtherance of murder, that's why it's so intense. That's why it's such an intense federal prosecution, because it's domestic terrorism. When you engage in domestic terrorism with, for example, the police, you're going to prison. When you engage in federal group stalking and monitoring as a police officer, you're going to federal prison. When you engage in an act of physical violence, criminal defamation, something that is facilitating, enabling, aiding, accelerating, something like kidnapping or defamation to result in what is kidnapping, you're going to federal prison. You engage in what is rape against a targeted individual, guess what? You're going to federal prison. Okay, whereas under ordinary circumstances, rape, you are very much likely, you can still be subject to jail or prison, but this is upon facts of federal group stalking and monitoring. This is the government that's raping you. This is the government that's facilitating the harm to sexual violence that you're subject to, and you're going to federal prison. It's an act of terrorism committed by the state. You're going to federal prison. So understand under facts of gang stalking, this is escalated to a federal offense committed by the state, committed by the government, and you're going to prison for it because it's violence committed by the government upon facts of federal group stalking and monitoring. You're not just going to get a federal prosecution as a terrorist, which is bad enough. You're going to prison. You're losing your freedom. You are not necessarily losing your freedom off the bat as a gang stalker that I'm documenting at the Montclair Plaza. Okay, I'm documenting you, or you're being prosecuted, period, as an entity. But the entity that's engaged in what are facts where you're not going to engage in terrorism with kidnappers that are masquerading as a police department, you're going to prison. Okay, you're not going to engage in what is systematic gang stalking. You're going to work every day and you're gang stalking somebody trying to accomplish their murder. No, you're going to prison. You're not going to engage in what is a systematic means, a repeated means of gang stalking, and you know that you're being documented, like that's just going to be tolerated terrorism. No, you're going to prison. This is the entity that's engaging in what any acts of violence, assault with a deadly weapon. You think you're going to put your hands on the target individual, you're going to beat them up. No, you're going to go to federal prison. Okay? You're going to federal prison for that. You engage in criminal summoning, federal prison, kidnapping, federal prison. Any acts of violence, criminal defamation, sitting in court, bearing false witness on you're going to federal prison. P.O.C. Okay? Understand that's how that prosecution goes. This is the prosecution for domestic terrorism that the government is committing against American citizens. So the entity that is engaging in criminal conduct on behalf of the government you're talking about the entity that's going to make some decisions. And by the way, in California, it's too late. They already made these decisions. You're going to prison. But everybody else that's going to witness the lesson that California did not learn. They didn't take the warning before they were subject to these extreme consequences. And a lot of them, they're not even going to make it. They're already going to be deceased. Okay. And that's because of these are demons that have engaged in what are playing in the spirit. They've engaged in what is literally violation of spiritual laws that you just don't. And their consequence is going to be loss of their life. Okay. This is a demon that's down the alley. What is this? We got a license plate on here? Oh, no, it's just a loser that's stalking on a bike. These are the demons that engage in what are creating loud noise, which is identification of monitoring as well. But nonetheless, the entities engaging in this conduct, which is how you're going to prosecute which is not just somebody that's unfortunate, somebody that's being terrorized, somebody that's being targeted, is somebody that's subject to terrorism by the government. It's not just that person that's just being mean to them or just chose to cuss them out in traffic or something like that. The entity is being targeted by the state, where those facts apply, okay? Where you're being targeted, and the entity is doing so, the government. And so you're going to literally prosecute the government for what the government is doing. And the government is not getting away with it as it does it through the people. And the people that do it for the government as a gang stalker, you're going to prison for it. So if you think that it's worth it to lose your welfare check, to lose custody of your kids, and to go to prison, and then whenever you get out of prison with that criminal record, and you'll never be able to collect welfare again, you'll struggle getting your kids kids back if you can. And you're not going to be able to just live anywhere and apply to work anywhere if you even had a job in the first place. But the entity is engaging in this conduct, and those are the severe consequences. And there are many policies that are also going to serve to disincentivize domestic terrorism by the people of the state. This is what the entity is doing now. They're doing it like there's no consequence. This is an entity that is very fearful as well. I want to be clear, these demons are very scared. But what I've already told you, what do the demon possessed, what do the mentally ill, what do psychopaths do when they are fearful? They are not normal. These are not sane people. Those who are fearful, they engage in more acts of violence, actually. They engage in the exact opposite normal reaction. It's abnormal. Do not get that confused with the entity that's just, oh no, not that I care. I don't care whether you are trembling or not. That's not what this is about. You can feel however you want. Whether you're happy about going to prison or whether you're depressed, you're going to prison, okay? But nonetheless, the entity is very much fearful and is engaging in acts of violence, and that is informing you. These are the demon possessed. This is the mentally ill, okay? They are gratified by sex with children. You're not dealing with normal, healthy, functioning people at the outset, and that's everybody. This is the Nephilim. They have the same identical condition, demons. Okay, they are psychopaths. Their mental illness is manifest in their behavior. You're out in the streets in the middle of the night stalking a woman you don't even know me. At that, first of all, you're stalking a woman, even if you know her or not. But you're stalking a woman and you don't even know me, and you are obsessed. Like, you're consumed. You are passionate about it. Those are demons. Those are demons, okay? Gang stalking, just doing a donut in the parking lot. Let me get this license plate. Driving around in a Yukon license, 5SOD 746. These are demons, a car full of males, those are not men, a car full of males that are gang stalking, pacing around, driving through the parking lot and driving around through the alley. That's pacing. That's what they're doing. The entity is engaged in what it's monitoring, and those are, again, demons that are engaging at this conduct, this fixation, this obsession, this peculiar and demonic light. These are demons. And it's also relevant to the sick mind, okay? The mind that would engage in that behavior, the conduct that you see with light, that's direct indication regarding the sickness in their mind, the closeted mental illness that you are no longer ignorant about, and you can protect yourself being aware of it, okay? Because they're in your family, they're in your social circle if you haven't separated yourself already, and it's nothing that you need to, in fact, I wouldn't even make an announcement, oh, I know that you're a demon. I'm not advocating that you do that at all, but be armed and be informed. Because you'll know them, and you'll know them by their deeds. You'll know them by their behavior. You're not ignorant about the environment, and you're also aware about the behavioral pattern in that environment, and you can be aware of the fact that you're surrounded by demons. Because they want to present just like you. They want to look like you. And if you're not one of them, they're already targeting you. If you're not one of them, they're already targeting you. And I want to be clear, the demon-possessed, they even want to claim to be targeted. But this is, again, something that you can't manufacture and fake, because you can't make the government stalk a demon with helicopter. You can't. They're not targeting demons. The demons are already under the subjection of Satan. They're not worried about them. You're not a threat. Okay, the entity is engaging in, and so you're not being targeted, okay? The entity is engaging in this conduct against those, and if you are, I'm talking to, again, the children of God, those who belong to Christ Jesus, and he knows who you are, so I'm not worried about some demon feigning, oh, I know Christ Jesus, and let me pull out my tarot cards. It's not between, that's between you and Christ, but Scripture is very clear, and those who belong to him, his children, the one who he knew were going to hear this message, those of you who need to know about what's going on so that you are not ignorant. If you are a child of God, they already know who they already know who you are. Okay, you're being monitored. We're all under surveillance, but you are already a target whether you know it or not. Okay, and this is, again, part of the reason why the Lord permitted it to happen to me, and also permitted me to, and enabled me to create a system whereby you can expose it, prosecute it, document it, etc., enforce your rights. And even something that potentially I would be in a position to aid those in enforcing their rights with regard to my specialty in understanding and recognizing and prosecuting this type of case, which nobody is exposing. You know why? Because everybody's a part of it, and those that aren't a part of it are scared. Okay, so this is the entity that's again, I am fully fully capable of protect. That's what I'm doing. The prosecution of the state of California is I'm enforcing my rights as advocacy on behalf of the ordinary target individual. And it would be my life's passion to represent ordinary target individuals, to represent American citizens against the government that's keeping them under surveillance in furtherance of murder and kidnapping, because that's why they're gang stalking in the first place. And it is very clear where you are being targeted. It's nothing that you're going to like exaggerate. You can't lie and make it up. You can't manufacture. And I know exactly what it looks like. But anyway, that's neither here nor there right now. This is for purposes of what is a public service announcement, while you are witnessing what is the strip down of a city. The city of Ontario has been going to be stripped down. Called itself building itself up, and it just sacrificed everything. It's going to be stripped down to nothing, and that's what it needs to reflect the death that fills this city. Okay, it is currently 10:01 p.m. That's the entity that's engaging in what is sexual violence while I'm publishing. That's amplified audible activity. That's a demon. That's a demon. And the entity engages in what is amplified audible activity as though that motorcycle is going to cause the concrete to vibrate. Those are demons. That's the Nephilim. And that's how you know that they're focused on me as well. It's an engineered light that's giving you context. It's not just a loud motorcycle. No, it's not. With the light activity under the fake sun during the day, where's the fake sun? It's over me. They are stalking me. And that's what's so pathetic about them. But that's also speaking to obsession. The demon-possessed are obsessing over you, those who belong to Christ Jesus, and they know who you are. They literally want to be you. They can never be you, so they stalk and obsess over you and monitor you. Okay? It is currently 10:02 p.m. This is documentation of sexual violence that's underway and inflicted by businesses that are going to be prosecuted under civil and criminal law. This is P.O.C.
Here is ARCO monitoring. She's pacing in and out. And that's the Ontario Police pacing around in a circle. I just took pictures. They're flying in a circle right here. It does so at the same time that she starts locking the door. This is all audible noise and engineer light. And the Ontario Police are monitoring, just like the Ontario International Airport. The images I just took, they're flying over the Ontario downtown luxury apartments. Sarah's Regis Group, that's gang stalking. Sarah's Regis Group is gang stalking with the city of Ontario. And doing so with the Ontario Police Department, they're being disbanded. And that's federal prison. ARCO is systematically engaged in gang stalk with the city of Ontario. Here's one shadow over here. Here's two shadows right here. And this is the entity that engaged in assault with a deadly weapon. Okay, that's why they're being disbanded. That third party is engaged in what is a malicious act of assault and deadly weapon pursuant to surveillance, and that's federal prison. She is going to federal prison. AEIP 592, that's ARCO. The employee that I've been documenting, that's P.O.C, and she's a sex offender. This is a homosexual. Obsessed with my vagina. This is the conduct of the Nephilim and the public corruption of the business and the gang stalking demons. Okay, that's P.O.C. This is mental illness while they're flying in a circle. And this is about this right here that I'm going to publish on the internet, the podcast that the entity is monitoring. Mike LORENZ is very severely mentally ill. Mike LORENZ is a part of the Nephilim. This is the entity that's engaged in kidnapping. What is C. Hazelwood and Ravanko showing you? They are the Nephilim, and they're engaged in criminal monitoring. They're having no authority under the municipal code, by the way. They have no authority under the penal code. They have no authority under the law. They're engaged in surveillance, and that's why any gang stalking judge acting on this agency, you don't have any warrant or probable cause as a sheriff, and you certainly don't have any jurisdiction in the court. You're going to prison. The people of the state that engage in what is assault and battery with deadly weapons while they're gang stalking is federal prison. This demon's monitoring by blasting music. This fluoride, if he's not a natural born citizen, you deport them. 9MTK235 is gang stalking and engineer light with the entity that's flying in circles. This is directly correlated to what the entity is engaging in using helicopters. This is domestic terrorism. You see the black faces, the gang stalking immigrants, white folks, Asians, all alike are gang stalking with corrupt law enforcement. This is P.O.C. All right, that's the entity. ARCO is gang stalking. Starbucks is gang stalking. Chevron is gang. This is crossing path. And they engage in what is surveilling me, assault with a deadly weapon in the middle of the street, based on the entity that is hostile because they're engaged in what is the pattern of conduct. Everybody in that parking lot I documented, and they're sharing in surveillance with that agency that's flying in circles, like they are everywhere in the city of Ontario, over my hotel room, over Tracy Banks' apartment, over the top of my head, over the OVITT Family Community Library, over the Starbucks kidnapping on July 4, 2025. Guess what's happening to Ocean and Amelia and Patty and all them that committed kidnapping with that agency? They're going to prison. Okay, and their foolish documented criminal means of targeting is putting them in federal prison. That was a specific act of documented terrorism with the intent to obstruct justice. It's currently 10:08 p.m. This is being documented via podcast.
This is P.O.C. This is what the entity commits every time I am engaged in what is publishing their criminal conduct. And this is the entity that is going to be disbanded. Jason Isaac Fields is going to federal prison. The entity that's engaged in defaming my character with the criminal defamation of the Ontario police that are engaged in what is gang stalking me, you're going to federal prison. And everybody that engaged in kidnapping because they're not lawful arrest by this agency that's targeting, they're going to federal prison. The entity is also mentally ill. The Nephilim are gang stalking under the fake sun, and this agency is going to be disbanded, and they're all going to prison. That I'm documenting gang stalking me under the fake sun in furtherance of psychological torture, harassment, and terrorism, they're going to federal prison. This is P.O.C. This is Crossing Path. All right, this is what they're doing on the roads and the highways traffic. And this is the entity that's touching me when I'm unconscious in order to molest my person. That's the agency that is a sex offender. And it is very specific with regard to knowledge that the entity is not engaging in any emergency. The entity is not targeting anybody else. The entity is engaged in a documented pattern of stalking me at the Ontario Town Square, flying in circles over me for an hour, for 20 minutes, engaging what is a public nuisance. Doing so, flying over me while I'm at the Starbucks. Doing so while I'm documenting the supernatural phenomenon of a sun that rises and sets over me on 1 Street, Euclid Avenue. This is P.O.C. It is currently 10:09 p.m. This is the entity that's presented evidence to the world, to the nation, and to the federal government regarding the federal government's targeting me through the Ontario police. That's going to be dealt with, but the Ontario police in particular are being removed, including the fire department and the airport that are engaging in surveillance. This is P.O.C. It is currently 10:09 p.m. It's 10:10 p.m. I'm going to capture the entity continuously cycling like the Ontario Police Department is doing. It's a desperate act of the mentally ill that are going to be prosecuted for it. This is P.O.C. This is at ARCO, 434 North Euclid Avenue, and the ARCO employee is monitoring while she is engaged in what is gang stalking as an employee at the venue. That's what I'm documenting on video. And then the entity, as I catch them on video, then the psychopath just engage in what is flying in circles because, hey, why not? I've already got it on video. So just engage in more and more targeting. And this is what the entity is doing everywhere that I'm located in Ontario. That's the Port Professional Building, Woodside Senior Apartments. The entity doing so while I'm at the 7-Eleven at, I believe that's 636 North Vine Avenue. The entity doing so while I am at the Ontario Town Square, doing so while I'm at the OVITT Family Community Library, doing so while I am at Economy Inn at 2301 South Euclid Avenue. The entity is doing so while I'm on the bus, and the entity is stalking me by helicopter while that fake, and that's how you know it's me because the fake sun's over me through the window of that bus that's moving in real time while the entity is stalking in the path by helicopter. This is the entity that's doing so while I'm at Starbucks. Stalking, also the Starbucks at 706 West Holt is what I'm referring to, as this is a body of evidence that's already captured, and the entity fills up all the gas stalls at the ARCO while they're stalking together. The entity is maintaining traffic on the intersection of Euclid Avenue and Euclid Avenue and this is E. This is where the Ontario International Airport is also targeting, and this is what the entity is always doing. The moment that I'm getting ready to publish, they engage in more conduct, and it's all going on the internet. This is also going to go on X. But this is the entity, this is the Nephilim. I want to be clear. The Nephilim is calling itself an Ontario Police Department, and the Nephilim is being disbanded. The Nephilim is also going to federal prison. They engaged in kidnapping me, and that is including C. Torres, L. Martinez, B. Hook, and Nathan Morgan. That is the Nephilim. Those are demons. And they engaged in kidnapping with Tracy Banks May 29th, 2025. The Nephilim also includes L. Edwards, A. Casada, Alex Escobar, C. Hazelwood, and what is Owens and Ravanco. They're engaging in kidnapping and attempted kidnapping by Hazelwood and Owens on July 15, 2025. The entity is engaging in what is kidnapping by that agency that's clearly targeting by following me all around the city of Ontario, stalking me by helicopter, and doing so also as I engage in my documentation being published. The entity engaging in this documented pattern as well will start stalking by helicopter, flying over the top of my head, flying in circles over me while I am documenting and putting it on the internet in real time. This is the entity that is doing so while the federal government was never conducting an investigation. The federal government was gang stalking me and was sitting back trying to collect information. How does she respond to what, again, they're disregarding? The Ontario police isn't asking any questions. They're not investigating anything when you're stalking me and harassing with a helicopter. That's not an investigation. Moreover, the federal government is not conducting an investigation pursuant to criminal and false and malicious allegations. okay, about my character regarding property that should have been given to me in the first place. The Ontario Police Department is targeting with the impunity that I just captured, again, relevant to what is the entity that's relying on. Remember, Jason Fields stole money and property from me. Jason Fields doesn't want to go to prison for it. Jason Fields did so while engaging in what are sex trafficking me, putting me on camera and then putting me on the internet and then claiming that I did that myself, that I know that my body and my genitalia and everything is on the internet. The demons that are gang stalking me are obsessed with me and have already seen me in the nude while they're monitoring my vagina all day long at the OVITT Family Community Library, where the Ontario Police are stalking me by helicopter there as well. And Jason Fields, the federal government, are not conducting an investigation while I've been gathering the proof about Jason Fields engaging in gang stalking me with the Ontario Police and with the Los Angeles Police Department while feigning to be engaging in an investigation which is relevant to his corruption, targeting me with Tracy Banks. Doing so with the Ontario Police, who are not conducting an investigation clearly when you're engaging in what is harassing me and targeting me, not investigating me, not asking me any questions, not interviewing me, not bringing up any sort of allegations, but instead defaming me and making up information about a prescription, making up information about mental illness, but not talking about any sort of criminal conduct that I've engaged in. No allegations about that. But the entity is also engaging in what is feigning an investigation by the federal government and permitting the Ontario Police to act with this level of impunity. Why do you engage in what is stalking and harassing me for an hour and flying over me clearly when they know I'm putting it on the internet? Why? Because the federal government is not engaged in an investigation. The federal government, and not addressing and not exposing what the targeting City of Ontario is engaging in, planned on me being identified as mentally ill, reacting to the psychological torture of the Ontario Police Department and the people of the state, and intended to use that as evidence to support their defamatory and malicious assertions about me in court hearings that I had no participation and no knowledge of. And the entity was using the gang stalking by this entity, by the state of California, intending to do that, but that didn't work. That didn't happen. I maintained my ongoing public investigation, and my investigation is putting the federal government agents that had anything to do with that, it's putting them in prison. They're a part of what is the ongoing conspiracy to commit murder and kidnapping. They did so with regard to trying to oppress me and keep concealed criminal acts that they committed against me. This is targeting me, not investigating me. And any sort of assertions about so-called criminal acts that I committed does not provide Jason Fields or any of the federal government with any excuse regarding putting cameras in my home and watching me in the nude and putting it on the internet and making money off of it, permitting Tracy Banks and the people of the state to engage in that, gang stalking me by the state of California, LAPD, and the Ontario Police Department, for example, while you're claiming to be engaged in an investigation. It never had anything to do with an investigation whatsoever. That's nothing even remotely close to what an investigation resembles, both by the state of California and by the federal government that is engaging in what is essentially voyeurism, while they are lying about conducting an investigation, looking into me, while the Ontario Police are gang stalking me with this level of impunity. Doing so, why are they engaged in this level of obvious conduct? They were hoping that I would spaz out in the middle of the street so that Jason Isaac Fields could get footage of it and then report back in a federal court regarding hearings that I know nothing about, and then establish me as being mentally ill like they already lied about, which was how they were able to steal my money and property in the first place. This has nothing to do with an investigation, and the ongoing targeting by the Ontario Police is what is putting Fields in prison. He's going to prison under all circumstances. And not only that, so is his sex partner, Tracy Banks. They've engaged in targeting other people. Jason Fields has been corrupt. He is not a legitimate federal agent that was ignorant and didn't know this and didn't know that and had good intentions and clean hands with regard to what is a legitimate. No, what they claim as an investigation was targeting me. And I've been subject to targeting since I was a child. Jason Isaac Fields is engaging in that same government system. And he did so with regard to what are corrupt intentions and unlawful conduct that he committed as a corrupt official. And he is not a victim at all. And no American citizen should be subject to that. And you are speaking of what is the ongoing targeting while they are aware of my investigation. This is why Jason Fields and Tracy Banks have engaged in stealing my intellectual property. You're not investigating me when I am documenting targeting by the state. You're sitting up watching them target me, and you intended to use that targeting as an instrument to try to drive me crazy so that you could go back into a court where you lied on my character in the first place and try to establish me as mentally ill so you can get away with stealing my property. which again, the entity that engaged in that, they did so stealing my property when I had no part in the court hearings. I had no knowledge about my property, while the entity is still gang stalking, as you can hear, doing so by helicopter, okay? The entity is sounding amplified traffic while the Ontario police are stalking by helicopter still. Gang stalking at the Ontario Veterinary Hospital, doing so with light activity. I'm gonna go get that license plate because they're gang stalking with the Ontario Police Department. They're going in the path to engage in what is light activity, going to the veterinary office at 10:19 p.m. in the specific environment with the entity that's stalking by helicopter, flying in circles, amplifying traffic, doing so while they are monitoring me, license 9ANB106. That's doing so with the Ontario Police, and that is federal prison. And this is, again, the wealth of people that are going to federal prison is because of the criminal activity of the federal government that is gang stalking me. I just want to be clear on that. The entity is targeting me with the, this is a sex offender, and I'm documenting for hours the entity molesting me with impossible light. And then who engages in stalking by helicopter? The same sex offenders of the Ontario Police Department. I'm documenting assault with a deadly weapon, and who engages in what is stalking by helicopter? The criminals that are the violent offenders, the terrorists of the Ontario Police Department. The entities engaging in what is this conduct as the Ontario International Airport, I'm documenting them stalking, clearly targeting, which they are doing so again as I started documenting this. The Ontario police are flying in circles over what is Euclid Avenue at 506 North Euclid Avenue, and the Ontario International Airport is south of me, gang stalking on over the parking lot of the downtown Ontario luxury apartments outside of what's published on the website, and they're clearly doing so with the Ontario Police Department. That Ontario Police Department, that is being disbanded, and doing so pursuant to a documented pattern with knowledge of the evidence that's being published online, and then engaging in what is more criminal activity, evidence of targeting, which is going directly to what Tracy Banks lied on my character about, what her sex partner, that's the same age as her son, Eric Corey Spencer, who she probably had sex with Eric Spencer too, because they're engaged in what is a sex cult, and these demonic spirits are conjured up when you engage in incest. So Eric and Tracy Banks very likely may have had sex, and even if they hadn't, I'm pointing that out, it's relevant to their sick minds, where they're engaging in what is targeting me together by defaming my character and lying about my sexual activity when they are the ones that likely have sex with each other and everybody else that I know and they know, infecting each other, by the way, with STDs, and that includes the Ontario Police Department. Okay, how many of the Ontario Police Department have taken out a PPP loan in my name? That's what you need to look into. How many of the Ontario Police Department have engaged in what is lying on my character regarding criminal activity that I have supposedly engaged in? How many of that are a part of the Ontario Police Department have had sex with Tracy Banks? That's what you need to look into. The entity is engaging in, and because it's relevant to the entity that is conspiring against me, this is one entity. One, and this is the Nephilim. That's the Nephilim. That's that mental illness. These are demons that engage in that psychopathic conduct, and they do so pursuant to knowledge, and the entity is doing so pursuant to a very well-documented pattern of conduct. And the entity is doing so pursuant to what is my full capability of putting it right up on the internet, which is exactly where it's going in real time. And this is putting Jason Fields. You're not under when you're engaged in terrorism, when you're engaged in targeting an American citizen that winds up dead. Understand that I am the exception, not the norm. So ordinarily, Jason Isaac Fields, Tracy Banks, demons like the Ontario Police Department, they get away with targeting. They get away with bearing false witness, getting demons to bear false witness in court and setting them up for crimes that they didn't commit. They get away with that stuff. They get away with committing murder and then claiming that it's an unsolved crime and nobody knows what happened and they don't have any witnesses and they don't have any DNA and you know, who knows, they were a drug addict anyway. They probably, you know, they probably off themselves somewhere. They probably OD. They'll probably surface. They always run away and come back. The entity typically gets away with this. I am the exception, not the norm. When you are engaging in terrorism, which is gang stalking, is only committed for the purpose of the government to kidnap you. They want to take your freedom and they want to take your life. That's the only reason why. They're not doing it for some temporary amount of time and then they're going to leave you alone and go back. That's not what gang stalking serves the purpose of. They are gang stalking you to take your life and your liberty. When you are engaging in this, there is nothing that any federal agent engaging in this is going to state or provide that's going to keep them out of federal prison. Jason Fields is going to federal prison. And he is going to federal prison for murder that he's facilitated. He's going to federal prison for pedophilia that he's facilitated. He's going to federal prison for sex trafficking that he's facilitated. He's going to federal prison for ongoing psychological torture and sexual violence, sexually violent psychological torture, and terrorism. Stalking literally by a police department. ongoing threat to my life while you are stalking me as a police department. This is what the entity is doing under the 9:45 a.m. fake sun, by the way, where I am at the OVITT Family Community Library and they're engaged in criminal summoning. That fake sun is still there when I'm walking out of that OVITT Family Community Library at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Those are demons that are not engaged in what is any sort of investigation, chit-chatting with the people of the state. They're gang stalking with these demons that are playing cards in the middle of the night and calling themselves defending them because I call them what they are. Sitting around in their mother's basements, masturbating, watching child porn, and so are the Nephilim that are the Ontario police. They are the same. They're pedophiles as well. The entity's engaging in this and you are going to federal prison. This is the entity that defamed my character, then stole my money and property, then engaged in what is gang stalking me to try to cover it up. Okay, but gang stalking didn't cause me to unravel. Gang stalking is something that I diligently documented, and my investigation is putting Jason Fields in federal prison. He did not investigate me, and he never had any authority or warrant or probable cause, no basis whatsoever to target me. It was not an investigation at that. Understand the criminal conduct. You're not even talking about an actual investigation. It would still be a violation and I would still prosecute if you investigated me outside of any having a lawful authority pursuant to what are false claims. But it wasn't even an investigation. Jason Fields is targeting me. The federal government is targeting me to cover up criminal conduct that cowards don't want to go to prison for. Criminal conduct that they're still engaging in. They're still engaging in it right now while I'm documenting it. My investigation, not the gang stalking by the federal government, is what is putting the so-called investigators in prison. Jason Fields is one of them. But he didn't act by himself. He's acting with the Ontario Police Department. He's acting with this puppet, Mike Lorenz. He's acting with the puppet, Dominic Choi. He's acting with that puppet that resigned before him, Michael Moore. The entity is engaging in this pattern of conduct, and this entity is engaged in what is surveillance and a thought that they were going to just easily get rid of me and silence me, and it's not that easy. And not only that, my investigation is putting the terrorist in prison, contrary to what they intended, okay? The entity is engaged in stalking with impossible light with the Ontario Police Department. I very much documented them already. Yeah, these are the same sex offenders, the same ones, molesting again with light, in operation of their device, 9UDW176. These are the pedophiles in their mama's basement masturbating to child porn. License 6Z88346. A bunch of freak weirdos gang stalking with the Ontario Police Department that's being disbanded as a group of pedophiles acting in furtherance of murder, stalking a woman in the middle of the night, not actually even focused on playing cards with each other. Okay, this is the entity that's engaging in that violence together, and this is putting, again, Fields in prison. This is the entity that engaged in soliciting the help of the Ontario Police Department to target me, is putting Fields in prison. His own co-defendant targeting me with the Ontario Police Department is costing him his liberty because they are the most unintelligent group of demons targeting me that he could have ever solicited. This is an entity, he's going to federal prison for their stupidity. Okay, you are clearly targeting and you are clearly engaging in what is failing and trying to establish that I am mentally ill under any circumstances when I have a detailed and diligently maintained body of evidence showing clear targeting by that agency. And that agency that lied on my character at that agency that engaged in what is not only lying on my character but committing kidnapping. When you're targeting, that's not a false arrest. It's an unlawful arrest, but it's not a false arrest, meaning it's tortious. No, it's criminal. It's kidnapping. And they engaged in a series of kidnappings while you are clearly targeting. And it's clearly evidence that's going to be used against Jason Fields, who was also engaged in targeting. He was engaged in targeting before he sat in court and lied on my character. He is the same one that is engaged in what is maintaining a fraudulent marriage to me on paper. He was never investigating me. This was a means of getting away with criminal acts that he committed against me. You do not have that sort of innocence and absence of knowledge while at the same time you're married to me on paper so that you can what? Get away with stealing my property, my money. The entity that's stalking by helicopter is the entity that's engaged in criminal summoning. That's monitoring me. Like I stated before, that's exactly what the Ontario Fire Department is engaged in. That's AMR, that's gang stalking with the Ontario Police. And that's what they do under the fake sun. This is the entity that is losing the police. They don't have a police department, and they're not going to feign having one anymore. They don't have a fire department, so they're not going to feign having one anymore. They don't even have an airport, so they're not going to feign having one anymore. Upon being prosecuted for domestic terrorism and psychological torture, like the Ontario Police Department is demonstrating, and they're doing so, proving that Jason Isaac Fields was never engaged in any investigation. And the court that claimed to be soliciting his so-called investigation of myself is also engaged in targeting me. because that court knew very well that I wasn't present regarding the claims of this high school graduate, that nobody should be taking any sort of word from her. She, first of all, is engaged in what is claiming that I'm all sorts of everything but a child of God, and did so in my absence. And then you're claiming to be investigating me when you're not even in my, I'm not even, you don't have to investigate anything. I could have been in the hearings. I could have answered those questions myself. I could have clearly demonstrated that everything that was spoken against me was a lie. I should have been given my property years ago. Years ago. I mean over 10, 20 years ago. This is an entity that's engaged in what is theft of my property, and Tracy Banks is engaged in what is targeting with this, the government that I'm showing you is engaged in surveillance. American Medical Response, the Ontario Fire Department, the Ontario Police Department, the Ontario International Airport, the federal government, which corrupt actors that can't control their genitalia, that has sex with anything that will have sex with it. Jason Isaac Fields. Okay, this is an entity that's engaging in this pattern of conduct, and there was never any investigation. That's why you have a fraudulent marriage to me. He's going to prison. And the federal government has been engaged in targeting me and doing so in furtherance of obstruction. Did not want me to expose what the government has been doing to me. Did not want me to expose what they are. They are the Nephilim. They don't want me to expose how they are engaged in what is this criminal system of surveillance, which you are subject to. And this is, again, the most brutal act that a government in the United States could engage in. And the reason why I do say it's most brutal, that any government, because the United States is a hypocrite claiming that we are free and that we have privacy. It's worse than a government that would outright tell you that you don't have privacy. At least they would be upfront and letting you know, okay, yeah, no, you don't have freedom of speech. You can't just say anything about this regime, because if you do, we'll cut your head off or we'll cut your hands off or something like that. But at least you know the rules up front. In the United States, we have a constitution that the government literally treats like fecal matter. You're looking at and witnessing the entity stalking me by helicopter while I am enforcing my rights under an existing state and federal constitution. That's the entity that would, on an international stage, act as though it's some moral leader in the world, and it's not. We're not. The governor's not ignorant about what the state of California is engaged in. The governor's not ignorant about what the federal government is engaging in with the state of California. The governor's not even ignorant about what the city of Ontario is engaging in. You're not ignorant about what Paul Leon is maintaining. They're not ignorant about the surveillance that Mike Lorenz is maintaining. Okay, Gavin Newsom is fully engaged in surveillance. This is a statewide P.O.C. Criminal surveillance is very real, and the entity is engaging in what is criminal conduct licensed by the federal government that tried to kill me off, tried to, quote unquote, drive me crazy. They thought that gang stalking me was going to cause me to unravel. No, I was designed to withstand it and expose it, and my investigation, ironically, is going to put the federal officials in prison. Jason Isaac Fields is the only one, but that demon didn't do it by itself. They're going to federal prison. Everybody that's listening to my voice, and you know who you are because Christ knows who you are, and I'm telling you right now, you're going to prison. Okay, it's not just the Ontario Police Department who are putting you there. You're going to federal prison for what you are engaging in and for what you permitted the state to inflict upon me while you were engaging in it. You're going to federal prison. And the entity is engaging in that while the people of the state, you have a whole population of terrorists targeting and furtherance of murder. You have a lottery on my life, like some sort of contract. All the demons engaging in criminal conduct, trying to set me up for it, taking out loans in my name, engaging in what is sexual acts of violence against me, harassing me, engaging in what trying to harm me, like I'm documenting on an ongoing basis, including tonight, assault with a deadly weapon. That's committed by the government, not a private individual. That's committed by the government. And it's pursuant to gang stalking terrorism. And you're going to prison for it. That's the bigger picture. You're going to federal prison for targeting because you engaged in theft from me and I am still suffering the damages from it. You're going to federal prison for it. While Tracy Banks is sitting on property that belongs to me, you're going to federal prison for it. So I hope you know that. The entities, and Tracy Banks is going to federal prison, but you are going to federal prison. I prosecuted Tracy Banks a long time ago. You're going to federal prison for what you permitted her to engage in because I reported it a long time ago. You were sharing that criminal system with her. You're going to federal prison. It is current, and you're going to federal prison for what the Ontario Police Department is doing. That's a threat to my life. Those are murderers. That's a threat to my life that you are posing. You're going to federal prison for it. It is currently 10:38 p.m. Excuse me, it's 10:33 p.m. This is relevant to the federal RICO case as well. These are corrupt businesses. ARCO's gang stalking with the city of Ontario. The entity doing this because the entity is fearful of the podcast that I am going to publish. The entity doing so pursuant to, what is my timing? Chevron, that demon's in there gang stalking the same third-party license plate that I read. He's gang stalking while he is in the parking lot, getting into his vehicle. He's been monitoring the whole time with the Ontario police flying over me, flying in circles over the Chevron, flying over the ARCO, pacing back and forth, gang stalking me while he is engaged in federal stalking on the video of the internet, and that's relevant for what is deportation. Okay, these are, again, the gang stalking immigrants in the city of Ontario are going to be deported as well. Every federal agency is going to play a part in prosecuting the entity that's engaging in domestic terrorism, and the gang stalking population, that is the immigrant status, they're being deported. Okay, and that's also relevant to gang stalking immigrants. Any immigrants working for the airport, that they're all losing their jobs because that airport's out of here. They're going to be deported. Any immigrants working for the Ontario Police Department, okay, well, ICE is going to focus in on you because you're being disbanded and you're going to be deported. And that's the same with the fire department. The gang stalking population, ICE can have a field day in the city of Ontario, literally in the whole state of California. But as I'm just giving one city as an example, you're talking about deporting a massive amount of people, which Mr. Trump should be exceedingly excited about. Okay, it is currently 10:34 p.m. This is the entity that's in sharing in terrorism. While the police engage in criminal activity like that, targeting, that is the government blowing the whistle on everybody. You're telling on everyone. That's the entity that you're telling on everyone. They're gang stalking on the roads and the highways. The gang stalking businesses are doing so with that government, and the gang stalking population are doing so. They filled up every gas stall at ARCO. They're all monitoring together. And you can see the black people monitoring. You can see the white people monitoring. You can see the Asian folks monitoring. You can see the Latinos monitoring, because it has nothing to do with race. It's all colors of the rainbows with regard to the Nephilim. These are demons. So if you want to get demographics in it, it has nothing to do with race, though. But this is also letting you know about a lot of the illusions, a lot of the distractions that the Nephilim want to confuse you and condition your mind with. Oh, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Not in California. No, they don't. And what is a black life in the first place? I'm not even going to go into that. I'm going to leave that alone. It's an ignorant statement that sounded catchy. Okay, I understand. I am a black woman. It's not like I don't understand it. It's not like I was not grieved by the same things that I saw. And without going too deep into that subject, it is a distraction, and it's literally an excuse. In California, these demons could not care less. They are as black as the asphalt, monitoring me. Okay? The entity is what do you think Jason Fields is? He's not a man, but he's a black male, and he's monitoring. He's monitoring a black woman, and he's in law enforcement. But he didn't start off that way. I met this loser at Valley College. Okay, he's black, so are his parents. These are black folks that are engaged in targeting. And guess who they're targeting with? Law enforcement. And they want you to believe that there's some division amongst the black folks and law enforcement, and we need to enforce our rights, and this is something that we need to stand up for, because guess what? In California, they are targeting together. Those demons are on the same team. They do not, they don't discriminate with regard to targeting as demons together. The Nephilim they're not thinking about their racist ideals when they're targeting together. They are unified in that. And Black Lives Matter was a distraction. It was a money-making scheme. I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to leave that alone. But nonetheless, it is, and these are demons that engage in that. Okay, Black Lives Matter is not a relevant subject in California. They could not care less. They don't care. The entities engaged in murdering pursuant to this targeting system. They're engaged in surveillance, and they will use Black Lives Matter as a false narrative to pull your attention away from what is targeting by law enforcement in concert with the people of the state. If it's a black person that they killed pursuant to targeting, then they'll use the Black Lives Matter pursuant to the law enforcement narrative, but it has nothing to do with that. It is, yes, there are racist people that are demon-possessed. Absolutely. It's another spirit, like I stated before. But that is not the underlying, but that's not what's going on here. These are demons, and of all colors, okay? If I was a white woman, they would be targeting me with the same vigor. Okay, it's only the fact that I'm an African American woman that they probably in their own sick minds they utilize racial epithets as they are obsessing over me. Okay, I'm this and that in your mind, but you're also obsessed with my vagina. Make that make sense. Okay, but the entity is engaging in that pattern of conduct, and they're doing so pursuant to what is outside of what are carnal explanations. It is beyond racism. It is beyond what is the demographics. This is about what is the condition of those, and their demons. All right, so I want to document it's 10:38 p.m. The entity stalking again by flying over by helicopter. All right, this is criminal conduct that the entire city shares in, and like I stated, this is what the entity is doing when they're crossing path in police vehicles. They're stalking, and it's conspicuous stalking. And it's also conspicuous stalking using the helicopter, and this is the direct evidence that every demon-possessed gang stalker that I document of that agency is going to prison because they're doing so in furtherance of what is murder. You are stalking conspicuously and communicating a very specific threat. You're engaging in psychological torture, and you're engaging in what is harassment and terrorism while you are wearing a uniform, even engaging in what is criminal summoning, like I documented the other morning, talking to the people of the state. You're stalking and monitoring me, and you're a psychopath engaging in what is a tactic of psychological torture. And it is not less threatening; it's more threatening because it's very malicious conduct, and the entity keeps its back to you while they are stalking and monitoring you. You're going to federal prison for that. You don't have to say a word to the target individual. You're going to federal prison. All right, the entity is engaging in this P.O.C. and the entity stalking by helicopter is putting, like I said, it's always defeating itself. These demons have already lost. They're always defeating themselves, and the immigrant population is being deported. All right, it is currently 10:39 p.m. and this is P.O.C.